Okay, so this is the first of what will be several several conferences for the Treescapes program. The idea is that each of the conferences will have a different theme. Today, we're really going to be focusing on stakeholder engagement and the kind of interactions between the researchers on these projects, on our new projects, and the various stakeholders that are involved. The final conference, which will be in 3 years' time, will be essentially showcasing the whole program, and we'll have a series of events between then and now, looking at lots of different aspects of the program. If I can just say a bit about the background and what the research program is about, and then we will go into a series of videos that will describe each of the Call 1 funded projects. So in terms of background, the idea for Future Treescapes came from NERC's ideas process. This is kind of a mechanism for generating new strategic research priorities that can be proposed by individuals or by groups, and which can then be taken forward to funding. And in this particular case, about 2 years ago, there was clearly a growing consensus, a growing agreement that there was a need for more work, more research to improve our understanding of the role and function of treescapes. The background was really gaining sort of policy realization of the importance of nature-based solutions to climate change and the key role that tree planting and woodland expansion would play in all that. And also, I think it's true that the program came about in response to really calls from stakeholders, a very wide community of stakeholders, for work which will improve understandings of the vulnerability of trees, woods and forests, to not only to climate risks, but also to a growing array of pest and disease risks. And also, more positively, the role that our trees and woods can play in really enhancing our well-being and improving mental health. So this concept, all these ideas were developed, they were refined by a working group of academics and stakeholders, and it was agreed that the best way forward would be for a multi-funded approach, with money coming from UKRI, so notably the Natural Environment Research Council, ESRC, the Economic and Social Research Council, and the AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, with significantly funding from DEFRA and from the Scottish and Welsh governments. So very much a collaborative approach to the funding of the programme. The aims of the research programme overall are really three key aims. First, to improve our understanding of the role that trees, woods and forests play really in different contexts, but also to improve our understanding of the ways in which different management practices, amongst other things, have shaped the treescapes we currently have, and how those treescapes might evolve in future in response to different kind of strategies and pressures. And then also to look at the evidence base itself and how we might improve that and make it more applicable, more fit for purpose for the very key policy decisions that are going to need to be made about woodland expansion over coming years, and to really explore more generally what woodland expansion could look like in different settings, different contexts, and how we can best manage that process of expansion to ensure that we meet a variety of policy objectives. And then finally, to contribute to analyses of understanding the various risks, including global risks to the health of our trees, woods and forests, and their resilience going forward. So very ambitious program aims, and that really framed a series of investments. So beginning with the first call, which happened last year, and which has led to the funding of 6 large interdisciplinary research projects, which we will be hearing about today. Call 2, which is currently in process, is organised around a set of further research priorities that we've identified. And then there may be further opportunities for funding, which might come about. So a rolling program of investment, beginning with these sort of foundation projects that we're going to be talking about today. These are the 6 Call 1 projects. I'm not going to say anything about them now because we're going to be hearing much more about them during the course of the morning. But they represent a very wide range of research topics and have different focuses, various arrays of stakeholders involved in these projects, different ambitions. But it's a very exciting portfolio of first call projects. Stakeholder engagement, as I've already hinted, is really a hallmark of the programme overall. From the beginning, the ambition was to generate research which would have impact, which would have applicability in a range of situations. So one of the key aims is to generate these understandings that I've talked about, to come up with new decision aids, auditing frameworks, metrics, data sets that can really help inform policy making, some of those really big decisions that are going to have to be made in coming years, but also help, I think, membership groups, other organizations in their advocacy work, and of course, in terms of decision making actually in the field. So some hopefully more practical applications of the work, helping those who in fact planting the trees and managing the forests of the future. The aim of today really follows from that. So we have these 3 objectives for this morning. Certainly, we want to use the event to showcase the currently funded projects. That's really important. But also, we've organized things so that we're going to have a series of discussions between the principal investigators of the project, the researchers on the projects, and some of the stakeholders that are aligned with the individual projects. And the idea is to, at this early stage, hopefully, to initiate a dialogue between stakeholders and researchers, both at project level and across the whole programme. And then, very importantly, also to hear from the stakeholders themselves. What are their hopes and expectations for the programme? How can we ensure that their needs are really going to be met in the research that is going to be carried out? So the programme, in a minute, we're going to hear, or see rather, a series of video presentations, very short video presentations from each of the projects. Then we will get, again, brief presentations from the PIs in a series of panel sessions, 3 panel sessions, which will involve both PIs for projects and stakeholders. And there'll be lots of scope for hopefully discussion, questions from the floor. I think that'll be really, really good. And then concluding with a presentation from Ian Bateman on Net Zero Plus, really to focus again on the broader policy context for the research that's been done. And then we'll have a final wrap up. I hope that sounds good. There are a number of event instructions, I'm afraid, that we need to be aware of, given this is a Zoom conference. So here's this. It's going to be put in the chat shortly, but can you please ensure that your cameras and microphones are switched off during the webinar? You should be, if you could, edit your name so you could include your affiliation next to your name. Once we're into the panel sessions, it'll be possible to submit questions via the Q&A. So type your question, click send, or by raising your hand. The panel sessions will be chaired. So either Julie and I will be monitoring the questions, and we will be putting your questions to the panel. And also importantly, the session will be recorded and subsequently uploaded to the UK Treescapes YouTube. Great. So I think we're going to kick off with the videos. I think that comes next. So if I stop sharing my screen.
Hi, my name is Estrella Luna Diez, and I am the Principal Investigator of MEMBRA. MEMBRA stands for Understanding Memory of UK Treescapes for Better Resilience and Adaptation. So, what do we do in MEMBRA? We want to study whether trees can acquire memory. So, it's not the memory that we understand it for us, but we know that trees live for so long that they actually need to remember some of the past in order to help them with what is coming in the future. So, for example, we know that some of the stresses that we are going to address trigger changes in the trees. So they change how they grow, how they develop, also how they are responding to diseases or biotic stresses. So we are going to test whether there is a legacy of memory of those stresses that impact growth. So in order to look whether we have a memory, we are going to look at the epigenetics of that tree. And epigenetics means that we are going to be looking at something beyond the genetics, which is going to, without changing the DNA sequence, is going to affect the transcription of the genes and the way that trees actually adapt. And then we want to know whether that memory is maintained. So does the stress that happened 20 years ago, 5 years ago, is also remembered now? So does that epigenetic signature remains in the tree? And also, a very important question, does that memory transmit to the following generations? But of course, Membra is a lot more than just understanding how stress impacts DNA methylation, because we are also going to be looking at how we as humans are affected by the knowledge that trees have memories, because this is something that not everyone considers. And when we were putting this grant together, we were talking to people and some stakeholders. They were like, okay, I didn't even know that trees can actually have memories. So how is the concept of tree memory impacting our perception to those trees? The work that we have with the humanities and the arts and also the biology is going to provide us with the knowledge of what trees we want to conserve and we want to plant in the future, because they are going to be the more resilient ones for those hostile conditions in the future. Also, the work that we will be doing with the progenies is going to provide us a set of seeds that could potentially be more tolerant, more resilient for the future. So what we want to do is to create a nursery with those seeds and then plant a memory-inspired forest. So the policy component of this project is really big, because we will be able to shape that policy and to guide woodland managers and stakeholders to plant the resilient forest of the future.
I am the PI, that's Principal Investigator, of the Voices of the Future project, leading a multidisciplinary team of researchers spanning the sciences, social sciences, education and creative arts, working in partnership with community organisations, schools, policymakers and professionals. We aim to engage young people, particularly in urban areas, in recognising, valuing and promoting UK treescapes. Our argument is that most urban treescapes are little regarded, but may provide much needed carbon sequestration and storage to meet our future climate objectives. There are also the UK treescapes that are most closely associated with our own personal lived experience. We need to engage the citizens of tomorrow in understanding how these treescapes work and why they matter.
Our project will evaluate how young people relate to and engage with the trees that surround them, especially those children living within commonly marginalised backgrounds whose voices are rarely heard. We want to explore the opportunities and the tensions associated with tree planting and tree protection to inform best practice for the inclusion and empowerment of young people in the landscape and urban planning process. Our project will then apply innovative new methods of laser scanning and 3D X-ray imaging to assess the carbon sequestration and storage of urban trees in northern Britain. By quantifying this carbon store, we can twin the evolving carbon footprint of children and young people with their local treescapes, thus offering a tangible means by which the citizens of the future can value the treescapes that surround them.
Embedding this science within social science and education, our research team will encourage young people to find their sense of ownership and belonging in the treescapes of the future. We aim to offer children and young people hope and empowerment in envisaging their future relationship with treescapes and how this contributes to UK and global climate mitigation ambitions. This empowerment will be transformed through collaborations with teachers and curriculum makers into the learning of tomorrow. Finally, we will also plant treescapes and produce a strategy for the expansion of community forests in the Northwest with local, regional and national organisations. Our hope for the COP26 meeting is that the delegates will recognise and listen to the voices of young people and to build them into actions that arise from the meeting. Children and young people of today will be tasked as adults with delivering the ambitions of COP26, and they need to be valued and empowered to become the labour that meets this greatest of challenges.
The Castor project will focus on riparian treescapes in order to explore pathways to reforestation that address and navigate the complex social, cultural and ecological dynamics present in our landscapes. Riparian zones are key ecological components of resilient, biodiverse landscapes. Healthy riparian habitats often have greater structural diversity and species richness than adjacent land uses. They comprise vital corridors, providing connectivity, not just in terms of habitat, nutrients and gene flow, but also in terms of history, culture and communities. Riparian woodland in particular provides a number of important ecosystem services, including water filtration, flood risk mitigation and carbon storage. Trees drive keystone processes in this riparian zone, and through the presence of woody debris in the landscape, slow the flow of water downstream, lowering flood risk and providing shelter and habitat for a range of species. However, due to the simplification of our riparian habitats, we have suppressed these vital processes so that they no longer are the self-regulating, resilient systems that they once were. These habitats present opportunities for large-scale landscape recovery. This process is already underway, and understanding how social ecological dynamics in riparian treescapes relate to natural capital, biodiversity and cultural heritage goals is of particular importance given the recent return of a native ecosystem engineer. This represents a key opportunity for restoring our rivers and their floodplains, but we must develop forms of stewardship that promote new and lasting cultural associations between communities and landscapes and their future resilience. Castor will engage with a range of stakeholders to co-produce knowledge through innovative methods such as social arts practice, participatory GIS, augmented reality, Q methodology, and capitals accounting to identify new cultural, economic and nature-based routes to resilience. Our native woodlands are today fragmented and sparse, but a blueprint for their restoration still remains. Our river networks represent an opportunity for recovery, with around 240,000 kilometres of rivers and streams in England alone. Reforesting these networks should be at the heart of a programme for nature recovery and climate resilience. The Castor project is committed to this recovery and to working with our partners on the ground to generate knowledge that will help bring back diverse, resilient treescapes to our river catchments. The project's 6 work packages will compile evidence from ecological, earth observation, socioeconomic, cultural, literary, cartographic, archaeological and historical sources. Together, these interconnected ways of knowing will be used to unlock pathways to resilient riparian treescapes for the future.
Hi, my name is Stephen Cavers and I'm part of the team behind the New Leaf project. New Leaf focuses on the fundamental scientific question of how quickly tree species can adapt to changing conditions. We often hear that tree species will be slow to respond to climate change as they have long lifetimes and may take many years to reproduce. But tree species are also typically very genetically diverse, and they may disperse genes via pollen and seed over very large distances and produce large numbers of offspring. This can provide a substantial capacity to adapt to changing conditions. Indeed, there are good examples of evolution occurring even on timescales meaningful to human lifespans. However, the rapid pace of climate change or sudden emergence of new pests or pathogens may overwhelm any capacity that tree species have to respond. This has important practical consequences for the management and creation of treescapes. For example, in creating new treescapes, we could try to work with natural processes to allow or accelerate adaptation. Or we could be more radical and intervene directly to bring in trees from locations matching the conditions we expect for the UK in the future. In reality, these and other factors mean a mixture of different approaches is likely to be necessary, and New Leaf will aim to provide tools to help in making those choices. A key part of making these decisions lies in recognizing how uncertain the future is. Making predictions on the kind of timescales that are relevant to trees is difficult, not just forecasting local climatic conditions or estimating the probability that a new pathogen will emerge, but also, for example, about what value people in the future will place on the treescapes we create. So a central part of what New Leaf aims to do is to learn from decisions made in the past, to look at how they have shaped the treescapes we have today, and to talk to people and communities, especially those beyond the forestry and forest research communities, about how they deal with uncertainty in their own decision-making, and ask how this can guide us in making better decisions for more resilient treescapes in the future.
Our treescapes represent a world of connection, from the links between our past, present and future, between urban and rural, and between plants, animals and fungi. And as human beings, our culture and heritage, our health and well-being are deeply connected with our treescapes too. And trees in all settings and in all forms provide multiple benefits for our lives and livelihoods.
This project has connection at its heart. We are excited to work with stakeholders from a huge range of backgrounds, creating connections of our own as we work to fill knowledge gaps and equip decision makers with the tools they need to deliver thriving treescapes in the future. By exploring the myriad connections within and between our treescapes, learning from the past and taking stock of our present, we will be able to move towards a future where treescapes and our own communities can thrive.
Together, we'll be seeking to address 4 broad questions. What factors have influenced the form and function of our treescapes? And how has that affected the benefits they provide? We'll be thinking about what are the opportunities, barriers and delivery mechanisms for expanding UK treescapes. And we'll be asking how can we make our treescapes more beneficial and resilient. These are big questions with huge potential to shape our ways of thinking and acting in the future. As the project progresses, we'll be developing a range of outputs to encourage better knowledge and understanding of treescapes. We will develop tools for collaborative landscape-level management. We'll develop a series of policy briefings and guidance notes. And we'll develop a range of new interactive discovery walks. These will all be linked through an online toolkit that will help people work together to manage treescapes for the health and happiness of our communities all across the country.
Making these connections lies at the heart of the Connected Treescapes project. Over the next 3 years, researchers from across the UK will come together to explore how we can best manage our treescapes collectively for the benefit of all. The project team includes economists, psychologists, historians, ecologists, mathematical modelers, and social sciences and humanities researchers. Researchers will work collaboratively with partners in national and local government and the corporate and community sectors to make a tangible contribution to improving the UK's treescapes for the benefit of current and future generations.
Social and cultural values. Well, they are things that we associate with trees, so they might be memories from our childhoods and our pasts, or they might be specific events that have happened which are connected with a particular tree or an area of trees. And they can be very difficult to pin down. So quite often social and cultural values are things which are neglected in decision making, because whereas other environmental values have established systems for measuring and quantifying them, social and cultural values tend to be much more difficult to measure. So what we intend to do is to develop a new framework for identifying and working with social and cultural values, which will be an underpinning for our project. And then the really exciting bit comes in where we actually put that framework into practice and look at how we can use that framework to map social and cultural values and to then use them in decision making.
So when it comes to understanding the mix of trees that we already have across our towns and cities, we actually know surprisingly little. We know very little about the species mix across towns and cities, the age class, the condition they're in, or even the ownership profiles. Well, through this project, we're going to be setting up some urban tree observatories to go out and perform some detailed studies in 6 1-hectare plots for each of those case study locations and get lots of information for each tree.
So one of the techniques we have at our disposal is specialist remote sensing imagery, so that's images flown on planes, and we can use that to give us lots of information about the trees, their health status and other things that we're interested about with them.
We can get additional information from the aerial imaging or the remote sensing data that we get because we have a couple of different types of sensors on board, and these sensors see things that the human eye doesn't necessarily see. In particular, this can help us understand the different characteristics of the tree, the different health status, factors relating, for example, to water content, because we can also see in regions beyond the visible region that our eyes observe.
Well, we're interested in the treescapes of the past because the trees that we see around us today are largely a consequence of the decisions made in the past, whether 10 years ago or 100 years ago. Because one of our key sources are Ordnance Survey first edition maps, which have freestanding trees marked on them. So we're going to develop a machine learning computer vision approach to locate and identify those trees on the maps, and then we're going to take other historic sources and compare them against the OS maps to both verify the results and chart change over time.
We're really interested in stories because stories are carriers of value. They're repositories of our cultural and social values. But more than that, stories are spaces in which we formulate, We negotiate, we test, and then reformulate those values, because just as stories change, our values are always changing. So it's a constantly moving picture. But of course, storytelling is not just about looking backwards. It's a tool to enable us to imagine the futures we want to have. So we're also looking at what might our stories of future treescapes be as well.
In this project, we are engaging people in two ways. One is through the citizens and individuals, community groups themselves, and we're calling those citizen panels. And the other involves those who have a real stake in the management of trees. We will actually be doing really focused discussions, sharing and co-creating knowledge between these groups across the 3 different focal cities. The key with all of this is that we're using a range of approaches which incorporate citizen science using the platform Treezilla, as well as narrative storytelling, all to co-create this whole body of knowledge, local user-based knowledge about trees.
All right, so we're now going to go into the first panel session. And remember, the idea of these sessions is to give people in the audience a real chance to ask questions about how stakeholders are engaging with these individual projects, and what the potential is for developing these important partnerships. I'd like to start by inviting Kate Poole to just say a few words of introduction about her project, and then we'll hear briefly from the 2 stakeholders that we have invited to contribute to this panel. So Kate, over to you, please.
Hi everyone, that was such fun. I'm just recovering from how exciting that was to see everybody's videos, and congratulations, because I know how hard it was to do ours, and I'm really sorry that I look so dreadful. Sorry, you always think that when you watch someone. Sorry, I'll get over myself. This is the Voices of the Future project. We are so excited about our project, and I think one of the things that's really exciting for us is that we're looking at the relational nature of treescapes. We're looking at the relationship between treescapes and young children and young people, and we're thinking about how meaningful engagement with treescapes supports education, belonging and hope. And we'll hear from Jan White about the education element, and we'll also hear from Pete Stringers from City of Trees about what it feels to really engage in trees and treescapes in urban as well as rural areas. So why now? You've watched our video. This is such an exciting, I took that photograph. It's of a plot in an urban treescape environment in Old Trafford in Manchester. It belongs to a school called Seymour Park, and they want to reforest it. And City of Trees are going to be planting trees in that treescape very soon, a couple of months. And then we're going to be researching how the children, 90 year 3s to be precise, and their parents are going to engage with that over 3 years. So we're really lucky because we've got a real treescape to work with, as well as many other sites. I think it's a really important time to be doing research. What's incredible, I was saying to Clive, is how many people want to join our project. We've already got Manchester Museum excited. I think there's something very powerful about the now of projects. We have a really exciting multi-sited project team. We start with some work that Claire Risbeth is leading in Sheffield, looking at youth engagement in activism around treescapes, particularly focusing on Black and ethnic minority groups. And the tree twinning work that Simon Carr is doing is going to help us actually understand carbon sequestration, and with children and young people as co-investigators of that process. Our Learning, Belonging and Reimagining will involve curriculum finding in Aberdeen, working with Ben Aki and with children and young people in schools. We're working with migrant groups in Manchester and multilingual families in Rotherham. And then we're working with Mersey Forest to and test our work. And we're hoping to create what I call a lexicon of experience, which for me is something that uses ordinary everyday experience to map and understand future ways of knowing. It's a kind of knowing tool. We have so many disciplines. I'm excited about working across the social sciences the arts and humanities and actual science. I think that's going to be our most challenging part of our project. We've got a set of critical discussion groups led by Peter Craftle, who's here today, to do that. And I find that that is going to be remaking knowledge is one of our key tasks. We've got a variety of stakeholders, as you can see, many schools, and the Chartered College of Teaching is being fantastic in offering us the opportunity to cascade our work across the UK with a series of bursaries for teachers. I think co-production is at the heart of our work, and here Caitlin Nunn has been really helping us think through relational ways of working and learning in a way that actually produces new knowledge, but values everyday knowledge, values everyday languages, everybody's cultural ways of being, and is a reciprocity, sorry, I can't say that, at the heart of it. I think I'd like to just say we're a team. We work together, and I think that building that team has been a really exciting process over the last 6 months. I'd really like to thank the team for how much energy and enthusiasm they brought to our project. So I'm going to hand over to our fantastic stakeholders now. I think that's 5 minutes, I never know. But thank you for listening. And I'm just going to do that escape business.
Thanks, Kate. That's great. That's great. Shall we just briefly, just to start with, could we hear from Jan, please, from the Early Childhood Outdoors organisation? She is one of the stakeholders. So Jan, just
hi everyone. I'm Jan White. I'm Professor of Practice with the University of Wales Trinity St David and co-director of Early Childhood Outdoors. And I can't say how excited I am now, having seen all the videos, to be part of this amazing project.
Great, perfect. Pete Stringer, Pete, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm the Green Infrastructure Resilience Manager at City of Trees. City of Trees is the community forest for Greater Manchester. We're one of 12 community forests. We also have Mersey Forest on this conference as well. So they're our sister forest, if you like, in the Mersey belt across Merseyside and Greater Manchester. And yeah, we're really keen to, I think, try our processes for working with young people to hopefully engage their understanding and improve their understanding of why trees are so important in the urban environment. So it's really interesting for us because it's not something we really get to do in that level of detail. So we're very much looking forward to getting stuck in.
Great. All right. Well, we're now going to go into questions. I've got a couple of questions I might pose just to get things started. We've already heard a bit from Jan and Pete about what their hopes are for the project, but do you want to just elaborate a bit more, perhaps Jan first, about perhaps some of the understandings and even more the more tangible outputs you would hope you'd like to see coming out of the project that would help you in your work, in your organization's work?
Yeah, okay. If I just explain a little about what ECO is, Early Childhood Outdoors.
Perfect.
We are a meshwork of people who believe very strongly and very deeply in the right of all children actually, but we focus on birth to 7. The right of children to be outdoors, which seems to have become forgotten in the last few decades. So yeah, we're part of a mission to bring the outdoors back to children. And we work particularly as the people who then support others. So my focus within this project is to support early childhood education and care settings, the practitioners who work in those settings, and to engage them with children's relationship with nature. Hopes, I've got 3. Firstly for children, secondly for adults, and thirdly on a national level. So for children, I want to say first, I think young children can tell us so much. And more in recent years, I've become so very aware, this is very Froebelian, that we need to learn from children. Instead of us telling children what they need to know, children know how to learn, they know how to be in the world, and we need to learn from them. And I think young children have a really important, critical role to play in nature recovery. So I'm delighted that the way the project I'm particularly involved with will be with Abby, who's working with very young children in underrepresented groups in Rotherham, and to be able to bring the voice of the very young child into the picture so that we can learn how to be with trees. We can learn how to be in relationship. Yeah, we can find out a great deal by being with young children, hanging out with them. So my hopes for young children is that we investigate, understand, and are able to nurture young children's relationships with trees. And the output around that, I share this lovely lexicon of experience idea with Kate. I think I have a different set of experiences in my mind, but watching children's relationship with trees as a play partner, in total equal relationship. So not othering trees, but being with trees as beings, and what those experiences are that really, really deepen that relationship and set it up for life. For adults, for the practitioners within the settings and their parents, because in the early years, the family is the child is embedded in the family, and we work very closely with families. I hope that what we can do is create thinking and materials that can support practitioners to engage, to enthuse them about the depth and meaning of young children's relationship with trees and treescapes, and provide the right kind of support that motivates and enables them. And early years practitioners have a particular context that's very often underseen and under thought about. So I'm thrilled that we can act as the go-between between early years settings, those who work to support them, and this research project. And we hope an output for that will be a booklet or some other kind of appropriate resource that will really be very effective and appropriate for earlier settings and the families they work with. And then on a national level, of course, this is more aspirational, but I think the size and nature of this project makes me think this could happen. I'd really like to be able to influence the curriculum, the statutory curriculum framework that we work under. In England, that's the early years foundation stage. Each country has their own early years curriculum, but in England, it's silent on children's relationship with the environment. And the current, what's it called? The draft strategy for the education and children's services systems on sustainability and climate change says early years in the title, but then when you read it, it's extremely school oriented. It talks about teachers, lessons, classes, subjects, knowledge of the facts. It doesn't fit with early years philosophy and pedagogy. So I'd like to think we can influence how that develops. It's quite a long answer, hope that's okay.
That's great, thanks Jan, very, very exciting. It's really good to hear about your hopes for the project. It's fantastic. Pete, do you want to add on to that and tell us from your perspective what you would like to get from this project?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking really at the long term on this, Clive. You know, we live in an unequal world. It's obvious, isn't it? People that've got money get everything, and people that don't have money don't get a great deal. So, and that transpires with tree canopy cover across the UK. Invariably, the more socially deprived areas where minority groups are represented, have the lowest levels of tree canopy cover. We've got to do something about that. But if you want to do something about that, we've got to give people a voice to enable them to shout louder and to have the understanding of how they can make that process work for them to increase tree coverage in their area, whether that's in their parks, in their streets, or in their school grounds indeed. So, and we see young people as probably I suppose the group of people that are most likely to be able to influence that in the future. They are the climate change generation, and I think they really want to make a difference. So what I really hope from this project is that we can work with young people that are traditionally marginalised, and in particular individuals representing minority groups in Manchester and Greater Manchester, to provide them with an understanding of what trees are in terms of a crucial piece of infrastructure for our future. So give them all of that information that they can then become, I suppose, the ambassadors and the salespeople for driving that agenda forward, but also getting them involved in the planning and the delivery and the management of what we do, so that effectively, I suppose, what we're trying to do is create the community foresters of the future. And hopefully by that process, which then will, I hope, lead to a toolkit that can then be replicated and rolled out for other schools, that will be arming young people then to help address that imbalance, that social environmental inequity, so that we can start to create better treescapes right across Greater Manchester and beyond. Of course, this is a national project. And so that's what we would really like to see coming out of this, that we have an engaged army of young people with all the knowledge that they need to try and make a much more fairer environmental world for those underrepresented groups right across the UK, you know, starting here in Manchester and then spreading out further afield. So I think that for me is it. I'm always interested in how we can get more trees, and we need people to fight the good fight for us, and this is a mechanism for doing that.
Lovely, very good. I think probably the best thing to do before we open to further questions is to hear from Membra. So be great if Estrella, you could do a similar thing to Kate, just give a brief overview of the project, and we'll hear from a couple of your stakeholders, and then we'll go to the discussion. So Estrella, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Estrella. You have seen me in the video, which was also terrifying to watch. I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of slides just to introduce you to the project. You have seen what the project is about. So Membra stands for Understanding Memory of UK Treescapes for Better Resilience and Adaptation. So this is basically what we want to do. We want to understand how trees actually acquire, retain, and transmit memory of stress, of stresses that impact the growth and the survival of trees in the UK. So it is not me alone. There is a team of a lot of people. So it is 10 investigators. The project is led by the University of Birmingham and the Birmingham Institute of Forest Research. But we also have partners with the University of Exeter, University of Leicester, University of Leeds, and also Bangor University. So the investigator team is actually split into 3 main pillars. So we have the part more of the biology, that's where I include myself as well. And then we also have a part of ecology that it is led by Dr. Adriari Esquivel-Muilbert, that she's also in the call today. But then we also have that part of the arts and humanities that is led by Dr. Catherine Earnshaw, that she's also in the call. So we have these 3 main pillars that are all delivering the project and understanding memory of trees from different points of view. So in order to actually bring all these arts and humanities completely integrated into the picture, we are working with an artist collective that is called the Walking Forest, and these are one of the stakeholders that are actually contributing to this panel today, so they will be able to talk to you about the project later. And we have already started the recruitment, so we have a lot of positions, and we already have some postdocs, PDRAs that are starting or have started already, so we are well ahead of the project objectives. So in order to prevent from me losing all the hair that I have in my head, we also have a project manager with Karen Parry, that he is also in the call today. And he's going to lead all the interaction with the stakeholders, partners, and collaborators. So who are these people? We have from companies like, for example, Mel or nurseries, to the National Forest, the Woodland Trust, Future Tree Trust, and of course DEFRA. And this is all in order to apply all the results that we are going to get from the different 3 pillars of the project into policy application in terms of woodland management and also public engagement. And we also have a figure that we've called Membra Mentors, but at the moment, I think I need to come up with an acronym for them or a name for them, like mentors or something like that. But these are people that are actually going to come as supporting those three pillars in order to favor and benefit the interaction between the three main pillars of the project together with the stakeholders in order to be able to deliver all this project. So I will be talking a little bit more later about the objectives of Membra and how we are going to interact with the stakeholders to deliver them, but I'm going to pass it to the stakeholders that we have here, that is Natasha Simons from the Small Woods and also Shelley Castle from the Walking Forest.
Wonderful. Natasha, would you like to pick up and just say a few words about your angle on all this?
Yeah, thank you everyone, and yeah, I'm also really excited. Thanks to everyone to put videos together. That was absolutely fantastic and really gave us a flavour of what the funding project is all about. My name's Natasha Simons. I'm the Research and Evaluation Officer for Small Woods Coedlliol in Wales. I evaluate and manage the research for the social forestry arm of Small Woods. Small Woods is a national charity that supports new and experienced small wood owners and managers in the UK with expert advice and guidance to create sustainable woodlands. Small Woods also promotes social forestry, which is the part that I work in, and that supports over 800 people a year in taking part in structured woodland activities that benefit their mental and physical well-being and health. We work with people that live in areas of high deprivation or who have high health needs, and we're linking with the social prescribing networks across Wales as well. And our programs are designed to build self-confidence, self-esteem and social interaction while connecting to nature. We like the tagline that we have: healthy woodlands, healthy people. And I think that sums up exactly what we want to do here and what we want to achieve this project. This project with Membra is really exciting for us. You know, all research that we can be part of and involved in as an organisation and a charity, it's really important for us to get connected with researchers across different universities, and the project is really fantastic. We're interested, of course, in all research that contributes to promoting the value of trees and helping develop more resilient and healthy woodlands for the future, especially against the backdrop of climate change and pest disease and tree disease. As an organisation, we've always seen woodlands as multifunctional spaces. So working in a collaborative project like this across multidisciplines is just our cup of tea, to be honest. You know, we offer, we realise that trees offer multiple benefits to wildlife, to people in the economy. And on a daily basis, you know, we connect with our members. We've got over 2,300 members, Small Woods members, and also all of our participants that take part in our social forestry. And those stories, you know, there are quite a lot of people talking about stories through these projects, and of course, about memories of trees. It'd be really interesting to tap into those for us. It's something we haven't really done before in an organisation, looking into those tree memories and the importance and value of trees and how we can change people's attitudes towards trees as well, to protect them in the future. So I think that's really important. You know, obviously we're interested in all research that helps to build resilient woodlands and to pass that information on to our members. Our members are hungry for information about how they can protect their trees and forests. So it's really vitally important that we have that. And obviously policy change is something that we're interested in as well, if we can influence that and help with that. Yeah, great. Again, the value of woodlands to people is something that we're quite passionate about at Small Woods. So exploring across a number of areas is going to be really interesting for us and to be part of that. So yeah, we're just grateful that we are part of this amazing project.
All right, thanks, Natasha.
Yeah.
Finally, but by no means least, Shelley Castle, would you like to say a bit about your involvement in Membra?
Yes, thank you, Clive. Yeah, we're so excited to be part of this. As we haven't started and we co-create the projects with partners, it's very difficult to talk about it in any real specifics. So I'm just going to give an overview of Walking Forest. My name's Shelley Castle. And Walking Forest is a 10-year project, and we're currently in our 3rd year, but it's very much inspired by forest ecology, trees, and women's activism. It's led by 4 artists with very different disciplines. Lucy Neal, who's with us today, Anne-Marie Culhane, myself and Ruth Benthoven. And we work collaboratively both with participants and partners, focusing on socially and ecologically engaged responses to the climate and biodiversity crisis. And we've been really inspired by what we call the Last Suffragetry, which is a huge black pine tree planted by a suffragette called Rosie Hallsworth in an arboretum, planted over 100 years ago to honour the women of the suffrage movement. Unfortunately, and rather shockingly, it was bulldozed in the 1960s, and Rosie's tree is the only one that survived. And we've wondered over the years, what might suffragettes take a stand for today? And we felt it might well be for the rights of the natural world and for climate justice. So through the member project, we're really interested in asking what might change in us if we discover that trees have a type of memory which they hand down to their progeny. What might we feel and think about trees after connecting more closely with them, and also with the findings of the research during the member project itself? And will there be a potential shift in perception, and might it impact not only our language and our behaviour, but hopefully policy and possibly even law? So just as a basic overview, we're starting with the residential in Ancient Woodland on Dartmoor early next year, where we'll be sharing stories, experience and information across all the teams, the disciplines in the team. And then we'll partner with 2 or 3 people from the team. And with this interdisciplinary kind of connection, we'll shape and craft the content of these collaborations. And that will result in mixed media blogs, which we hope will share the research to a wider audience. And then we're going to work in the public facing phase with intergenerational groups to learn about tree ecology, seed germination and care, so we can begin growing a nursery of trees. And these trees will be reflecting the findings of the science during the member project, but also will find their way into an intentional forest, which will be planted in 2028 to honour climate activists from around the world, just as the suffragette arboretum did over 100 years ago. So yeah, we're we're thrilled to be involved.
Lovely, thanks Shirley. All right, well, now is the moment that everyone has a chance to ask questions related to member and Voice of the Future in the first instance, if that's possible. So please, if you have any thoughts, observations, questions about some of those partnerships that we've just heard about, now is your moment. If you want to raise a hand or put a question into the Q&A section, please do now.
We've got one question in the Q&A for Voices of the Future, and it's from Lucy Neal, who would like to know a little bit more about the role of artists in the project.
Shall I answer that? Because I think we've got Steve Poole, one of the artists in residence, in the audience, but I'm not sure he can speak, so I have to speak. And also, Caitlin, you might be able to speak. Can you talk about the role of artists with me? Is that all right? I don't know if Caitlin can speak.
Yes,
yes.
that's
Caitlin,
fine.
can you maybe start off and then I'll follow? Because I think let's start with you.
Sure. Okay, so we are really privileged to have two wonderful community artists with us on the project, but a lot of us have also have a long history of working with participatory and arts-based approaches. So we're using art as a mode of exploration and inquiry, as well as knowledge sharing, because we recognise that the kind of affective, embodied and sensory experiences of and knowledge about treescapes can be quite difficult to express through more conventional research approaches. And also that there are particular affordances for these creative modes of exploration and expression for children and young people, and especially those from non-English speaking backgrounds, that recognise and embrace a range of literacies. So what we're really hoping through engaging with arts is to really generate a rich polyvocal account of children and young people's engagement with trees, that both deepens the knowledge that we can generate through the project, but also hopefully creates an affective connection with our audiences, and can really help express the kind of the knowledge and the care for trees that exist beyond more conventional forms of literacy. So I guess, I mean, that's all I would really say. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Kate.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things about this project is we're weaving art through the project in a way that's very integrated. So we are not doing that thing of saying, okay, our artists are going to do the film at the end. We're more thinking, how can art help us? And having worked with Steve Poole, who has been doing projects in Sheffield on the Adventure Playground previously, it's more of a thing about thinking through arts methods and arts approaches. So one of the things we might be doing with the team is thinking about hope, and we had a critical discussion lab on hope recently, and hope's a really important part of our project with Johan Siebers leading, and also a lot of art is predicated on hope, and I think that kind of idea of art as a way of thinking is very important to our project. So yeah,
that's good. There's actually a related question in the Q&A. Someone is asking in terms of, I probably addressed this to Estrella in the first instance. Do you think that we can see and identify tree memory from paintings? Estrella, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, so we are not purposely looking at paintings. We are isolating those stresses from records that we have from the past, like, for example, historic droughts and things like that. And also biotic stresses that are impacting trees now, like trees that are diseased at the moment. But definitely that would be a really exciting possibility to go back into the records of some paintings and see whether there were any signs of stress on those trees that maybe we could go and track back. One of the things that we are going to be doing is to actually bring the past into now, into understanding that memory. So we are also going to look at tree rings, and we will be able to identify with those tree rings when there has been a stress that maybe was that happened many years ago. So that is something that we could potentially correlate with paintings. But yeah, that is an interesting approach, I think. Don't know if Shelley wants to say anything about it related to the paintings.
It depends whether the question is about identifying stress and memory, or whether it's about expressing our findings and as a collaborative with very different disciplines and co-creating the work together with everyone that we come into contact with. Who knows, there may be painting in there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a really interesting thing, what we are just talking about, because we have these workshops in the project that are called creative laboratories. So the scientists we are going to pair with the artists, and we are going to create things. We are going to create paintings or podcast, music, things like that. So one of the things that we could actually create is those trees that we know that are suffering from stress right now. We could potentially paint them to leave them as a memory for the future. So all those seeds that we are collecting from those trees, actually we could say they come from that tree that it was painted by this artist. So that is actually maybe not looking at the memory from the past in paintings, but actually reflecting in paintings now the stress that they are having to have that as a memory in the future. Very cool.
Great. Any raised hands? Don't seem to be any raised hands.
No, there's no raised hands at the moment.
Okay. I'm just wondering actually in terms of the Voice for the Future project, the challenges of translating the outputs from research into kind of policy applications. I know that Jan mentioned her ambition in terms of the curriculum, the design of the national curriculum. Kate and Jan, do you have any further reflections on that? I mean, how challenging that's going to be, what the barriers might be to really achieving that translation?
Well, I mean, I loved it when, Jan, you were amazing when you talked about getting this onto the national curriculum. I mean, I actually think we should really try. So we've got Natural England on our project, and Cheryl from Natural England and I have the ambition to talk to the DFE, who I have got contacts with them, to think about their setting up a sustainability curriculum. I feel like there's everything to play for. We're very lucky, and we've got two teacher training faculties in our project: Manchester Met, which is a very large teacher training faculty, and Aberdeen. And the Aberdeen project, Liz Curtis has definitely got links into the Scottish national curriculum, which is actually easy, it's more porous to influence. But I actually am quite determined to do this. I think we can. I think we just need to be very clear about what the learning outcomes are. So because we're setting up a series of bursaries for teachers, which are going to be, well, they have been nationally advertised through Chartered College of Teachers. And I feel like that's our first step, to get teachers all doing research, drawing on our research about curriculum and what they can do in the classroom across both early years, primary and secondary, across England and Scotland, and then give that evidence through Natural England into DFE. I kind of think we can do it. I'm determined. Jan, do you want to say anything?
Well, I think there's a lot of optimism with Wales and Scotland. The university I'm associated with is the Teacher Training Centre for Wales, and has been really, really very heavily involved in the new curriculum that starts September 2022 in Wales. It's inspired by the Scottish curriculum, and it's, in fact, the consultant for it was the same original person. And the Welsh curriculum has always, since 2008, had a very strong emphasis on children being outdoors, and that the outdoors is a pedagogical environment. Actually, bigger than that, the Welsh curriculum is embedded in education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And apparently that's very much more foregrounded in their new 3 to 19 curriculum. I think the challenge is enormous for us within England. Given the recent rewrite, unmandated by us, rewrite of the EYFS, the Early Years Foundation stage. So I'm not sure that they will be very receptive to that, although of course the people at the helm have changed. And the new education minister was the children's minister previously, so he does think about the early years, he does understand it as a separate phase of education. I do get very upset when the language is all teachers, school, lessons, knowledge of facts, and unfortunately that's some of the change that's happened in the what's the word for it? The current version of the Early Years Foundation stage, which is our statutory guidance, statutory framework. And that very much is about knowledge and facts, unfortunately, rather than relationship and care. But there should be opportunity, shouldn't there, within the sustainability and climate change draft document. And although at the moment that's very weak on the early years, I think if we could influence that the intention with that is that will cover all phases of education. And we could do a lot to strengthen that in terms of the early years, so that it actually fits with early years philosophy and pedagogy. So I think maybe that's where our opportunity would be, shorter term. Longer term, yes, EYFS. Being inspired by what's happened in Scotland and Wales. Yeah, it's very exciting what's taking place in Wales at the moment. So being able to draw from that, it will be fantastic.
Okay, thanks, Jan. In terms of raised hands, I think Chris.
Yeah, we
Jones.
do have. Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, yeah, Chris.
Chris has a question. Chris, fire away.
Thank you. It's for Estrella, really, I think. I think it's really exciting that you were looking at genetics and adaptability of trees. Are you looking at either provenances or indeed species which are sort of outside the UK range, heading down into Southern Europe? Thank you.
So at the moment for this project, we have only species and locations that are in the UK. So we have 6 tree species, that is oak, ash, beech, birch, hazel, and Sitka spruce. But this is by no means
where we will stop. So if we want to go beyond, then we will go into other places in Europe. So there are a few cost action projects that are looking at epigenetics of stress in plants, not only in trees, in all plant species. And it's called Epicatch. So we are part of that now, and we are going to be collaborating and in close contact with all the partners in Europe as well.
Thanks, Estrella.
Thank you.
We've probably got time for one more question. Anybody?
Yes, we do have one. Just a second. Got a hand up from Liz Lyon.
Okay, Liz. Where are you, Liz?
You need to unmute, Liz.
I can't find her, I'm afraid. Where is she?
We can't hear you, Liz. You just need to unmute. You should be able to.
No. Well, perhaps we'll have to come back to that question.
Yeah.
I think. So we're coming to the end of this session. My impression is there are lots of different strands that we could be following here. It's amazing. We've just kind of touched a bit on some of those developing partnerships, which is really great, I think. What we're going to do now is have a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and have the next panel session.
Welcome to the second session of the conference today. We've got 2 projects in this session. We've got Castor and New Leaf. I know that the attendees can't see who is in the room apart from the panelists, so just wanted to let you know that we've got around about, it varies between about 170 and 186 participants in the conference today, so I thought you might appreciate knowing that. So a nice big audience, which is fantastic to see so much interest in the programme and the projects. We've got both PIs from Castor and New Leaf on the panel, and 2 stakeholders from each of those projects. I just would like to ask the PIs to introduce briefly their project and their team, and I'll ask the stakeholders to briefly introduce themselves and their organisation and what their role is on the project. It might also be nice if the PIs could introduce themselves in the chat facility. So if anybody would like to speak to them directly, they can do that via that. So maybe during this session, if you could just do that in the chat, that would be great. If I could ask first from Castor, Matthew, if you could briefly introduce yourself and your team and project, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. I've got a few slides. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah.
So I'll just screen share now then.
Just share if you can, yeah.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Matthew Dennis from the University of Manchester. I'm a geographer and I'm the principal investigator for the Castor project. Castor stands for Creative Adaptive Solutions for Treescapes of Rivers. And we're interested in how a focus on riparian woodland expansion can contribute to the restoring of natural processes, really, and nature recovery and climate resilience in river catchments. That sounds perhaps quite geographically specific, I think, but when you consider that wherever you are, you're never not in a river catchment. So we think it's a quite practical and powerful way to try to understand how woodland expansion can affect and determine key outcomes for people and nature. So the project's a collaboration between various partner organisations and institutions. Too many to go through all of them individually now, so I'll just focus on the investigator team in this short introduction. So there are 6 work packages, and in work package 1 we've got Hannah O'Regan, who is a zoo archaeologist, I think I've got that right, from the University of Nottingham, and Steve Carver from the University of Leeds, who specialises in GIS and is an expert, an authority on rewilding as well. We also have Anne-Grethe Larsen on this work package, a colleague from the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands, who specialises in biogeomorphology and geochronology. They'll be supported in this work by a research associate, Philip Barrett, and this work package is all about establishing baselines for healthy natural functioning treescapes. The hydroecological expertise on the project come from Megan Clark and Mark Smith from the University of Leeds and Josh Larson at the University of Birmingham, who will be leading the work on how expanding treescapes in riparian areas can affect the way water behaves in the landscape. We have Ian Conbury from the University of Cumbria, who's a human geographer, and who, along with Steve, co-chairs the IUCN Rewilding Task Group. And they, with support from Sally Hawkins, one of our research associates, will be working to identify pathways to woodland expansion by exploring alternative approaches to land management that can be realised through new income streams that support the provision of public goods. We've got also on the project Joanna Taylor, a Presidential Fellow in the Digital Humanities at Manchester, and Johnny Hook, another GIS specialist from the University of Manchester. And they'll be looking at perceptions of the landscape using innovative methods from participatory GIS, literary deep mapping, and virtual reality interventions to help project participants explore how physical and cultural changes in the landscape have occurred throughout time and how the future might look within the context of expanding treescapes. And that they'll be exploring and questioning existing assumptions and perceptions around landscape character and imagining future scenarios for treescape expansion. I'm deliberately not giving academic titles here because I know there are one or two potential promotions in the pipeline, so I'm steering clear of that. Jenna Ashton is also on the project. She's an artist, curator and lecturer in heritage studies, also at the University of Manchester. And she leads work package 5, supported by Philip James, a former professor of ecology at the University of Salford. And they'll be engaging with this cultural dimension with a focus on stewardship and care and how these aspects can be understood through social arts practice and storytelling approaches. So here they'll be asking, what is the role of cultural participation and creative practice in understanding the process of value creation? Then on work package 6, we've got Pollyanna Bispo, a remote sensing and forest ecology specialist, also at geography with me at the University of Manchester, and Claire Holt, a woodland conservation expert from the University of Cumbria. And they'll be working with me and newly appointed research associate Andy Speak to assess the cover, structure and connectedness of the existing canopy in our case study catchments. And then we'll be modelling key ecological and environmental outcomes as a function of expanding riparian woodland in those case study areas. And that includes modelling the role of ecosystem engineers, such as the Eurasian beaver. That's the work packages. So the key partners on the project, we're working with the National Trust, especially the Trust Marsden Moor Estate in West Yorkshire. We're working with Wild Ennerdale up in the Western Lake District and the Eden Rivers Trust. And we've also got a sort of wider circle of support in the form of the advisory group, where we have the representation from the Eden Rivers Trust, the Lancs Wildlife Trust, the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, the Beaver Trust, Woodland Trust, National Trust. I think that might be all the trusts we've got on the project, and also experts and colleagues from the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. So I'm very pleased that Rosie Hallsworth from the Marsden Moor Estate is able to join us today on the call, and also Chris Jones from the Beaver Trust and the Cornwall Beaver Project. They were both really helpful and influential when we were putting ideas together and developing the proposal, and I'm really happy they also agreed to be either partners or stay on the advisory board for the project. And it's been really good working with them so far, and thank you both for coming to this this event today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. That's it from me as far as introductions go.
Thanks, Matthew. Could I now ask Rosie, so one of the cost stakeholders, to just briefly introduce yourself and your role in the project? Thanks.
Yeah, so as Matthew has introduced, I'm Rosie Hallsworth. I'm the Countryside and Partnerships Manager for the National Trust in West Yorkshire. So I cover a number of National Trust properties here, including Marsden Moor. So Marsden Moor is a 5,000 acre upland moorland estate, including lots of areas of degraded blanket bog. We've been working there for a number of years on moorland restoration schemes and woodland creation as well in the cloughs there in the valleys. So really our involvement with the Castor project is around kind of, I suppose, adding value to projects and conservation work that we've got ongoing at Marsden Moor anyway, and just it's a way for us to, as I say, add value and add a kind of different dimensions to projects that we might not necessarily normally look at, so that more of the kind of cultural dimension. There's lots of different aspects that Castor can really add into kind of our day-to-day work, but also our conservation projects going forward. So it's really exciting to be a partner on the project, and really keen to see kind of how it goes from strength to strength, really.
Brilliant, thanks, Rosie. Can I go over to Chris? Although, Chris, are you there?
You might have gone to put the kettle on. I'm not sure.
I see, really. All right. Oh no, he's back.
Thank you. Yeah, I am here. I was just dashing for the microwave.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Jones. I'm the Community and Land Director of Beaver Trust. Also, for my sins, the host of the Cornwall Beaver Project, and indeed an active working farmer, whatever that means in the 21st century. Yeah, it is a really interesting and multifaceted project, this the Treescapes thing, and I would hope what I'm bringing to it perhaps is a little bit of a reality check, I suppose, about what all this is going to mean when it actually gets developed into policy to do something actually on someone's land, because sooner or later everything that we're all talking about has got to happen somewhere, and there is no nowhere. It all belongs to someone, so therefore whatever comes out of this has got to be pretty bloody persuasive in order to get landowners and so on board. I've been involved in the co-creation is too strong a word, but the evolution perhaps of the Woodlands for Water bit of the UCO effort, which is going on at the moment. I could wax very lyrical about the shortcomings of that process, but at least we've got some up and running, which is paying people to plant trees next to rivers if they want to take it up. I would also say that from that, there's something called Riverscapes, which in a way is exactly what the Castor project is all about. It is about developing land in a very ecological kind of way next to rivers. Completely concur with everything that's been said about our river margins. These are the natural nature recovery network. Rivers go wherever they go. They ignore political boundaries. They ignore land ownership boundaries. They go where they go. And you can't plough a river. You can't grow spuds in a river. These are the places we need to be generating a sort of maximum value for nature and other things, of course, as well. I'll probably bang off on enough right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Can I now ask Stephen Cavers, the PI for New Leaf, to introduce your team, please?
Thanks, Julie. Can I share a couple of slides as well?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and well, thanks to the organisers for today's event. It's really looking good, and it's great to see the level of interest So it's superb to have so many people attending today. I just want to say a few brief things more about the New Leaf project, just a quick introduction to what we're trying to do, and then emphasize a couple of things that I think are really important about how we're going to try and make things work. So New Leaf is really, it's about learning to adapt to an uncertain future, but it's fundamentally about whether or not tree species have the capacity to adapt to the challenges that are coming their way in terms of climate change and new pests and diseases in particular. And whether there's a way that we can use their sort of natural resilience, whether we can work with that to try and create more resilient treescapes. So the objectives of the project are really, well, they're multiple, but what we're trying to do is to firstly learn from what's already been done in terms of the historic manipulation of the UK landscape, the tree planting that's happened over the last, particularly the last 100 years, and what that's done to the genetic diversity and species diversity of the landscape and what that means for resilience. And really to learn from how people made those choices, I guess, what they expected about the future, and relate that to the way we're making choices at the moment and what we expect about the future and whether or not that affects how we're going to make choices about putting trees in landscapes. A fundamental part of what we're doing is to quantify the biological sort of evolutionary adaptive potential of tree species to be able to change. So a lot of what we will be doing is measuring that in experimental settings and in the wild, actually looking at what happens when you move trees among different environments. We're going to use some natural experiments where translocations have already happened, but we've also got some nice experimental setups where we can measure traits and try to understand how genetic diversity plays a role in allowing tree species to adapt to new conditions. Fundamentally, we are interested also in I guess the shift from perhaps what was maybe understood as a more clear-cut future in the past to the present, where we have a very uncertain future. We don't know what's coming. We've got some predictions over what we expect to happen, but unexpected things are also very likely. And so when we're dealing with that sort of uncertainty, it gets much harder to make choices. And really, perhaps what we need to be thinking about doing is building change processes into our treescapes. But we want to also learn from people who are maybe already used to thinking about uncertainty. And that's a key place where we're going to be working with our arts partners to look at how people deal with uncertainty in other walks of life and try and maybe look at ways that we can bring that into making choices about treescapes. Finally, a particular thing that we want to focus on is really to get down to the practicality of what we're doing when we're planting trees or creating treescapes, and maybe to resolve conflicts about how much we need to direct that. Do we actually need to get involved, or can we allow things to happen on their own? Or perhaps at the other end of the spectrum, do we actually need to be making very calculated predictions about what's coming and trying to match what we're planting to those conditions? And probably in reality, that's a spectrum of choices, but we want to look at how we can provide the information to make a decision along that spectrum. So the New Leaf team is a group of 8 or 9 institutions, depending on how you count. It's a really good team. We've had some really stimulating discussions already. It's very diverse. We've got people from the arts, from social sciences, from economics, and from a whole range of the natural sciences, from entomology, epidemiology, through ecology and genetics. And I think it's going to be a really dynamic and interesting environment to work in. In the context of today, we are also, I want to say a bit about our stakeholder interactions. So we've got a permanent team who've all agreed to work with the project as we go through. So Chris Nichols from the Woodland Trust and David White from the Forestry Commission, who are both here on the panel today. But also Claire Trivedi from DEFRA and Mariam Zulfikar from Archangel, although just having recently left the Forestry Commission as well as arts advisor there. Give us a real sort of diverse group of people with some very valuable different opinions, and I think will be an essential part of keeping us on track. But we also have a number of ways that we're going to be working with stakeholders directly. So we'll be holding 4 UK-based stakeholder events where we'll actually be getting people involved, looking for opinions and trying to get interaction on the way that our research is unfolding. We'll be holding 2 international events, going over to Norway and Poland to learn from the situations that they're facing there, where there's some very different and potentially, I guess, much more dramatic changes in the way their treescapes are changing. We will be learning from oral histories and semi-structured interviews about what people have done in the past in terms of managing treescapes. And really focusing back in on the question of uncertainty, we'll be reviewing arts case studies, looking at how artists have handled uncertainty and indeterminacy in the way that they work. And finally, using all of that interviews and discussion to create a new piece of verbatim theatre, which will be something that we hope really works effectively in trying to communicate some of the messages that the project hopes to get across. Thanks, Julie. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Stephen. That's great. Can I now invite Chris Nichols, if you could introduce yourself and your role in New Leaf, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, hi, I'm Chris Nichols. I'm Conservation Evidence Manager at the Woodland Trust. We're, for those of you who don't know, we're the largest charity looking at conservation of UK woods and trees. And our involvement in New Leaf is kind of representative of our involvement around across a number of projects in the Treescapes programme, and we're really excited to be part of so kind of widely. In fact, we're lucky enough to be here with the Castor project team, and a colleague of mine, Ewan McHenry, is actually on the project advisory group of that, and Paul Armstrong, colleague of mine, is also speaking later in a panel discussion. So there's a lot of Woodland Trust across the UK Treescapes programme, and we're really proud of that and really excited to be involved in the project that we're involved in, especially the New Leaf project, because it's so important for us as an organisation. One of our conservation principles is that we prioritise native woods and trees, and you know, we believe very strongly in local provenance and the sort of inherent genetic variability and diversity of native trees. So the fact that the New Leaf project is looking at some of that genetic diversity and the ability of native trees to track changing climate into the future is really interesting to us. We have a conservation research program ourselves, where we fund research, and we also, as part of that, support a wide range of research projects, which is kind of representative of our involvement in these projects here. And it's we've also got a colleague of mine, Hazel Jackson, is on the program advisory board for the UK Treescapes programme. So we're really excited about our involvement. And so I think I'll leave it there, and it'd be great to sort of tease out some of the sort of wider issues in the.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. David White, if you could introduce yourself and your role in the New Leaf project, please.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. So my name's David White. I'm the Woodland and Climate Change Adaptation Advisor for the Forestry Commission, working within the Policy and Advice National Team for England. So we're very pleased to be involved with this project, and I'm pleased to be a member of the steering group. Why am I pleased to be involved with it? Because the question of whether trees can adapt quickly enough to change is fundamental, but knowing when and if human intervention is needed and in what circumstances is a very important question as well, and will help us advise on woodland management and woodland creation which is fit for the future. A single answer to it. All woodlands are slightly different, and there are nuances to woodland types and what people want to see from those woodlands and objectives. So it'll be really interesting to see some of the work that this project and the wider Treescapes project comes up with. Thank you.
Thanks, that's great. Okay, I'd like to now start and offer out a question to the stakeholders on the panel, interested in what your hopes for the project that you're involved with are, particularly around any new understandings that might emerge from the project, or any new outputs such as any data sets or toolkits. So if we start maybe with Chris Nichols from the Woodland Trust. So yeah, what are your hopes really for New Leaf?
Yeah, thanks very much. We're really excited about the opportunities from the New Leaf project, especially around the kind of practical guidance that we think the project will be able to provide. We've actually about to publish our own woodland creation guidance, which really looks at looking at the right tree in the right place by the right method. And part of that is you know, a complementary approach between planting, natural regeneration, direct seeding, and that has to be quite site specific. But we're really you know, across the whole conservation sector and forestry industry, we're operating under a whole range of uncertainties and potential risks around our approach to creating new woodland. And the New Leaf project is going to a real huge output for us is kind of reducing that uncertainty and providing practical guidance to better shore up our approaches. We're also really excited about the kind of the policy recommendations that look to come out of the project. You know, we're really excited about the kind of scientific tools that will help practitioners make decisions on the ground, which comes with a whole range of kind of opportunities and challenges, but not least actually kind of, you know, how you kind of ensure that people are using the tools that are available once they've been created. And I think that's what one of the ways the Woodland Trust can support the project is through that kind of communication and sort of you know, implementing best practice that comes from the New Leaf project. So that's just a few kind of brief ways that we're looking forward to outputs being used.
Perfect, thank you very much. Can I ask the same question of Rosie, please? So in terms of Caster, what are your hopes for the Caster project?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of a two-pronged hope, really. So the first being around just trying to help us be a little bit more strategic about our woodland creation ambition, and rather than looking at you know, what areas where we've got a corner of a field maybe that a tenant or a commoner might be happy for us to plant trees. Actually, is that the most appropriate place, and how can we be more strategic in terms of identifying potential for maximising benefits around habitat connectivity, that kind of thing, connecting up existing treescapes and providing the most benefit, really the most bang for our buck. So that more strategic approach to it, and yeah, just helping us plan where those trees might be of most benefit. And then the second hope, I suppose, in terms of what we would like to get out of it is a kind of greater, more in-depth understanding of the reason on kind of scientific reasons or legislative reasons around why there might be barriers to woodland creation. So what are the sort of socio-economic, you know, social drivers, cultural drivers around people's understanding of a landscape in its current state, where, you know, where do people's ideas of what their local landscape looks like, where does that come from, and how can we better and more effectively kind of have those conversations with stakeholders, members of the public, commoners, tenants locally, to explain the nature of landscape change and kind of facilitate that in a bringing everyone along with us kind of way, rather than us top down giving it to people. So those, I suppose, are the two areas I think that we would hope to benefit from. Yeah,
perfect, thank you very much. Then back to the New Leaf. David, can I ask the same question to you?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I'd like to see come out of it is, and I'm pleased to see, you know, I think will happen with it, is this link between different woodland types, different objectives, and the research community. and the fostering of this understanding that there's no one size fits all. But also, I think through the project, it would be interesting to see, we know that trees have been through change before, and several of the projects will sort of pick up on this, but it'll be interesting to see how the combined constraints that we've got in the country at the moment with pests and diseases, climate change, deer, squirrels and other things, you know, how that's going to impact on trees and how the research project can help people better understand and better manage and conserve our woodlands.
Great, thank you very much. And then back to Caster, to Chris, Beaver Trust.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be really wanting to see a breaking down of silos emerging from this. I passionately believe that we need a much more holistic view of land use. This is about land use, really, this issue. It's not about trees or grass or concrete, it's about land use. And we need to kind of get a grip of that idea. We need to understand that it all belongs to somebody, and we better have them on board. But I can absolutely assure you from what I've seen so far with the Nature for Climate Fund and so on, rather than having a holistic view of land use, it's two things. It's either planting trees or trying to grow more peat. Bonkers. We need to have a much more holistic view and a much more diverse approach to land use along our rivers. So for heaven's sake, let's be really connecting with the landowning community, if you like, and also connecting back into DEFRA, who are the people in the end who will wield the money that will enable any of this to happen, to say, let's, rather than have just the Forest Commission in charge of trees, let's have a much more holistic view of this. I mean, I'm in the process of producing a river buffer scheme of my own on this farm, and the only way to do it has been through higher tier stewardship, which is just about to finish. So I've been incredibly lucky to get it there. We need elms to be picking up the cudgels on this, and there is absolutely no sign whatever that Elms has any strategy in this direction at all, as far as I can see as a farmer. So we're just being left abandoned up the creek in a barbed wire canoe at the moment. So that's what I'd like to see from this is a breaking down of silos, getting people into the room and working out a common way forward to having a much more diverse land use along our rivers and streams. And you know, just this approach of closed canopy woodland is not it. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. I think it was really interesting to get your thoughts on your hopes for the projects that you're involved in, and they're very diverse actually, ranging from really quite high level strategic policy, practical implications of the projects, right the way down to actual fairly specific site level influences, which is really interesting. So yeah, hopefully having you involved really early in the projects is going to make such a difference to have some really meaningful outcomes to the projects that have been funded. I'd like now to open it up to the floor. Clive, do we have any hands up or any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions relating to uncertainty, actually, from Vadim Sarev and from Kate Paul as well. Probably directed at Stephen, I think, in the first instance. So Stephen, could you perhaps elaborate a bit on how you will be dealing with uncertainty in your project? And I think actually particularly how you think your stakeholders might help you in meeting that sort of challenge.
Thanks, Clive. Yeah, well, maybe I'll address Vadim's question directly, and then I may draw on one of my other contributors to follow up on the second question. So in terms of the issue of uncertainty and native species and whether or not they'll flourish, I think there's some interesting points in there. So thanks, Vadim, that's an interesting question. I think firstly, I would say although we'll sort of get to the question of whether or not the specifics of whether or not species are likely to be able to adapt to a range of different conditions as the project moves on. We are starting right from the outset with uncertainty as our assumption about what's going to, that's the context that we're going to have to be dealing with throughout. So, it's not that we'll be moving through and then dealing with uncertainty as an issue at the end. It's really where we're beginning. In terms of whether or not we can expect native species to flourish in the future, I think that highlights perhaps the point David raised, that the context is really important here. That there's an awful lot wrapped up in the word flourish there. I think that if you're a forester and you're planting something, then flourish means grow tall and straight and produce a lot of timber in the minimum amount of time, really. Whereas flourish to somebody trying to create habitat for biodiversity conservation might mean something quite different. And so really understanding what we want to get from our treescapes, I guess, is probably a first step. Whether or not we can rely on native species to perform that role of flourishing in different contexts is really what we have to get down to, I think. And it may be that native species can't fulfill a role of timber production to the kind of standards that we want in future climates, but native species may well be able to perform a perfectly good habitat creation role in other contexts, or they may, depending on how we treat them, be able to also produce timber. So it's really a question of understanding how things are going to be managed, what the aims we have for those trees are, and what we really are looking to be the outcome. To go to so Kate's question, could I possibly ask Chris or Dee maybe to come in and just comment on the link between uncertainty and concepts and feelings like anticipation and hope?
I don't know whether Chris is going to turn his camera on. Yeah, we're both here. Hi folks, great to be here. And to hear so much more about the projects and all the stakeholders' aspirations and aims for those too. It's been so rich. Chris, maybe I can just begin and then you can pick up. I've turned my camera on, Chris, just so that you know that.
Yeah,
I think that's a brilliant question, Kate. I suppose one of the things we're thinking about here a little bit is that maybe uncertainty itself is an affect. It's a state of being. So it sort of sits alongside then anticipation and hope. And whilst we wouldn't want to deny, in totality, the predictions, like very challenging predictions around climate crises, I think the thing about uncertainty is that it holds a space open in the future. So it doesn't close it down with stories of dread and dead ends at the outset. It still leaves an aspiration for more open responses to what might become. So it's a sort of state of becoming, a practice, I guess, of being, in the moment of uncertainty and being comfortable with that uncertainty. We've had some great discussions in the team already. Around like, could we communicate? Can the arts communicate uncertainty? Can the arts perhaps present models of data that reveal them as themselves a bit uncertain, not so black and white as the data might suggest. And I've been thinking a bit about that the arts have to do more than communicate uncertainty. It's a way of sort of inhabiting, practicing, being okay with, living with, enacting uncertainty perhaps. And that is orientated to the future. That's us facing the future, I guess. I don't know if that's a bit woolly, Kate, but it's a great question and one for me to take away with, thinking of uncertainty as itself an effect, really, and what that means as a practitioner in forest landscape, but also as citizens engaging in and encountering our treescapes. The temporal dimension, I guess, of the landscape is one of long duration, and so the trees themselves are pointing towards a future. And one of the things that Stephen himself raised this week was, are we so intent on the future that we're forgetting about the present? And what happens if we orientate to the now? What does that do to our practices and actions? Chris, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I can't turn my camera on for some reason. I think it got turned off earlier by somebody else. I think what's been interesting is just, so in terms of some of the work we're doing, we're looking at particular examples of artists' projects, including David Nash's Ash Dome or Herman de Vries's Meadow, the Helena Newton Harrison's work on Sage Hen and various other projects, and Oliver Kellerhammer's Neo-Eocene. And some, I mean, in terms of anticipation, what we wondered in a way was to what extent these projects envisaged a stable future or a changing future. And we know that Oliver Kellerhammer's Neo-Eocene is precisely asking what was living where I live 150,000 years ago when it was warmer, and will it still grow here? And the Harrisons are asking about adaptation as well. But that question of what do we anticipate and what have we been anticipating? And I suppose David Nash talks about some artworks being coming artworks and some artworks being going artworks. For those of you who know his practice, he carved a boulder out of a bowl of a oak tree and put it in a river, and over 20 years it went down to the sea and disappeared. He called that a going work. When he planted the Ash Dome, he called it a coming work, but obviously it in itself has turned into a going work because of ash dieback. So actually, I think that the idea of changes of state and anticipation and our imagination is really critical. I hope that is some sort of answer.
Thank you. Was there any more points to be made on that? Is there any more?
There are more questions, but not on that. Not on that.
Okay. No. Okay. Are there any questions pertaining to Castor?
There is another. There's a question here actually in the question answer from In Covery, which is asking Matthew and his colleagues, do you see any opportunities for Castor to address social justice and access issues relating to riparian woodlands? Matthew.
This one for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly.
So, okay. Yeah, well, we talked about this at the cafe this week, didn't we, Ian, as well, and this idea of parity, I suppose, when we're rolling out these different ways to incentivize land use change for public goods, and how we do that, and what sort of scale we do that, and how we sort of do it in a way that we're not excluding certain people from certain, from livelihoods and what have you. And I think there's some nervousness around what the ELMS scheme are going to present and what the options farmers have. I know from talking to friends and colleagues on the advisory panel that there are certainly small scale farmers that are worried about not being able to make the ELMS scheme work, or any of the different versions that are coming online, and how what will happen to their farm, and will that continue? Will that get bought up by larger farms, larger landowners, this kind of thing? And so making sure we do the right thing for nature and the environment, but also for people, is really important. And thankfully, we've got people like Chris to offer that kind of insight to help us guide us through that sort of difficult landscape on the project. But it's certainly something to pick up at the next coffee morning, Ian. Yes.
Chris or Rosie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I do. Yes, please. I think that already the UK grant scheme does have extra incentives for public access. I think that we probably all recognise that, yes, public access is a nice thing, but it can be antithetical to ecology. Lots and lots of things we might wish to see coming with our new riparian zones may be frightened off by access. So, it's a very double-edged thing. I'd really urge people to think not of riparian woodlands, but of riparian land, some of which may have closed canopy woodland, some of it may be very open canopy, some of it may just be scrub, some of it may be actively used grassland. I think the key thing, if we want to begin to make ourselves resilient, is to have natural processes pertaining next to our rivers and streams. And if we concentrate on that rather than a particular point, a thing of riparian woodland, it'll be a lot more, well, just more useful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I would back Chris up there, and I would say also that we're trying to focus on natural processes and restoring natural processes. And I don't know if anyone from Natural England's on the call, but moving away from this kind of habitat and species obsessed way of looking at biodiversity conservation as well, and whether by restoring natural processes we can actually create more resilient landscapes rather than just focusing on this compositionalist approach that's been going on for a long time. So I would completely agree with Chris on that fact. But as he said earlier as well, you know, these sorts of processes don't adhere to acknowledge kind of administrative boundaries or access boundaries. So it is a bit of a messy issue that we need to work through on the project.
Great. Rosie, did you want to add anything to that? The last minute.
Chris and Matt have probably pretty much covered everything that I would say. But yeah, just really that the understanding of kind of where people's understanding of a landscape comes from, particularly a landscape from my perspective like Marsden Moor, where we have a lot of public access, and just how we kind of influence people's understanding and people's idea of what that landscape should look like. And I think, yeah, access has a major part to play in that. But yeah, I would really echo what Chris has said about access versus ecology and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Great, really interesting discussion there. We've come to the end of this session, bang on 11:40, and we've now got a 5-minute break. So we'll then go into the third session. So if you'd like to come back at 11:45 for the third session, thank you.
Connected Treescapes with Julia Tuza, my colleague at York. So our project is all about connections, as Jane Hill explained in our short film that we saw earlier. So these connections are at the heart of what we're trying to address in our project. And we got a focus on 3 specific benefits from treescapes: culture and heritage, biodiversity and nature recovery, and health and well-being. And these connections also underpin our approach to working with our partners. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes to describe in a bit more detail which partners we're working with on this project and why. So a key partner across all parts of our project is the Tree Council. So for those of you who don't know the Tree Council, it's an umbrella group with a mission to care for trees and our planet's future. The reason we're working with them is that they have unparalleled connections with organisations concerned with trees across the private, public and voluntary sectors. And their experience and networks is going to be really helpful to us in helping us link up with different organisations and communities in our case studies, and also across the whole of the UK. So the Tree Council is going to help us run events, develop engagement and outreach activities, and also identify opportunities for transferring our results across the country. So in our project, we're going to be doing some analysis at national level, but the main focus for most of our work is going to be in 5 case studies, which are spread across the UK. So within our case studies, we also have key partner organisations to help with our work there. So in North West England, we're going to be working with the Mersey Forest team. We're going to benefit from their vast experience in managing a highly successful community forest. And particularly, we're going to benefit from their practical experience promoting treescapes for health and well-being as part of a natural health service. So Claire Olver from Mersey Forest team is with us today, and Claire's going to shortly tell you a bit more about their hopes for the project. In Northern Ireland, we're going to be working with the Woodland Trust and the Dufferin Foundation. Northern Ireland's unique in many ways, politically, socioeconomically and ecologically. And that provides some challenges, but also many opportunities for generating benefits from new treescapes. And Paul Armstrong from the Woodland Trust is here on the panel today, and he's going to let you know a bit more about what the Woodland Trust is hoping to gain from the project in a few minutes. So in Scotland, we're working in an area covered by the Central Scotland Green Network. And here we're partnering with the Buccleuch Living Heritage Trusts and Estates. And Brookfield is a really interesting partner for our project because it manages its estates to provide a balanced and sustainable portfolio across its various assets. And it also uses a natural capital framework to inform how it manages its environment. So it therefore shares this portfolio approach with us because this is the framework we're using for our project. And Brookfield is really good for us as well because it has a really rich historical archive, and that's going to be the basis for a lot of our historical and cultural work in our Scottish case study. In Wales, we're working with the Welsh Government and we're using the new National Forest for Wales as a case study, and with a likely focus on South Wales. The National Forest of Wales is the newest initiative we're going to be working with, and this provides a contrasting perspective, for example, with Mersey Forest, because it's being set up and developed in quite a different way, and it's a completely new initiative. But nevertheless, it also has some things in common. So as with the Mersey Forest, the southern part of the National Forest for Wales is located in a post-industrial landscape, many communities that are relatively disadvantaged and where the potential social benefits of increasing tree and woodland cover are therefore really substantial. And our final case study is in the English Midlands, and here we're going to be working with the National Forest Company. And this provides another example of a long-established community forest initiative in a post-industrial area. And the National Forest has had a particular focus on biodiversity, and this will complement the work we're going to be doing on biodiversity and nature recovery. But the National Forest also wants to do a lot more on health and well-being and how to make most of those benefits from their treescapes. So we're going to be working with them really closely on those aspects of the forest. And we're going to work with them to get new information on how the people are using the National Forest and how this is influencing the health and well-being benefits that they're obtaining. And then our final two partners are Rothamsted Research and Butterfly Conservation. So these organisations run some of the most comprehensive long-term monitoring studies on insects in the world. And some members of our project team have collaborated with them previously. And some of the work they've done together has highlighted the impacts of climate change, habitat fragmentation, and other environmental factors on insect biodiversity. And because biodiversity is really critical in our project in terms of underpinning many of the wider benefits from trees and woodlands, the partnerships with Rothamsted and Butterfly Conservation are going to be invaluable in providing a really strong ecological baseline for the work we're going to do. So ultimately, our project is about understanding how to inform those who are responsible for treescapes to take decisions in a way that maximise the delivery of a wide range of benefits from treescapes across a landscape scale. And we know that treescape owners and managers need to make their decisions in the context of increasing uncertainty, as we've heard in the Q&A already. They need to respond to new policy initiatives to expand tree cover, but they need to do this against the backdrop of various stresses, such as climate change, pollution, storms, and emerging pests and diseases. And so these management decisions need to take account of the vulnerabilities of different treescapes to these stressors and how these affect the various benefits they provide. So the success of landscape level treescapes in delivering both policy objectives and public benefits is going to depend critically on establishing coordinated management across different landowners. And our partners are going to play a really vital role in our project. They're going to help us to understand how different treescape managers, whether it's policymakers, local authorities, rural communities, or private owners, how they make decisions to manage their existing treescapes and how they make decisions about investing in future ones. So I shall leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian, that's great. Shall we hear from your two stakeholders now? So beginning, I think, with Paul Armstrong from the Woodland Trust, Northern Ireland. Paul, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me along today. So yeah, the Woodland Trust, as previously highlighted, we're the UK's largest woodland conservation charity. And our work's focused on creating new woodland, native woodland, as well as protecting and restoring our existing ancient and long established woods and trees. Northern Ireland, as Perrin highlighted, is unique in many, many ways, but it's one of the least wooded regions in Europe. And actually the least wooded region in the UK and Ireland at just under 9% woodland cover. This compares to the UK average of 13% and 11% in the Republic of Ireland. So ancient woodland, it makes up just 0.04% of our landscape compared to a UK average of 2.5%. So it's really, really precious and really, really rare in Northern Ireland. So the work that we're doing in Northern Ireland includes the recent acquisition and restoration of ancient woodland at Moran Park. That's in Kilkeel, County Louth, close to the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Nearly 70% of ancient woodland in Northern Ireland is less than 2 hectares in size. Mourne Park includes 73 hectares of ancient woodland, so it marks a significant milestone in protecting and restoring this habitat across Northern Ireland and indeed the island of Ireland. So Mourne Park features as part of the Connected Treescapes project, and as this significant woodland is situated along the Belfast to Dublin economic corridor, and when we open this to the public next year, it will have the potential to deliver huge benefits to those living in and around Ireland's 2 largest cities. In terms of knowledge and evidence gaps, really keen to see a natural capital balance sheet that will establish the value of these benefits. In particular, the health and well-being benefits. I think that's really timely post-COVID, and as we've seen greater engagement with our sites during and after various lockdowns. And if we're to articulate these benefits to policymakers, which would be my role, this could support the business case to better fund ancient woodland restoration. There's quite rightly a focus on afforestation as the least wooded country in the UK and Ireland, and a greater emphasis coming along the road for peatland restoration. However, ancient woodland restoration doesn't really have the same profile, and I think that if we were to articulate those benefits, we may be able to build a better case for better restoration. Another knowledge gap is information related to ancient woodland across the island of Ireland. And given the location of this site near the border, we would love to see an inventory across the island of Ireland. The Woodland Trust host and manage the ancient woodland inventory for Northern Ireland, but we would like to see an all-island inventory, which means that we can have a much more joined-up approach. And again, articulating the benefits to people of these sites will help build a case for doing that.
Great, thanks, Paul. Lots of things to come back to there, I think. Claire, would you like to tell us about the Mersey Forest?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name's Claire Olver, and I'm Programmes Manager at the Mersey Forest. I've heard before that Mersey Forest is one of England's community forests. There are now 13 of us around the country. And for nearly 30 years, because I remember when they were announced back in 1990, community forests have been transforming landscapes and communities. So it's planting trees with people and then enjoying the benefits of those with people. So it's very much, the community is very much part and parcel of everything we do. And we're situated in and around some of our largest towns and cities. So here in the Northwest, we cover the areas across 8 local authorities in Cheshire and Merseyside. Started off with very low woodland cover. That's now doubled since we've been involved, against a backdrop of post-industrial landscapes. So areas around St Helens, known for coal mining and then brick building, subsequently landfilling as well. So we've got a very interesting post-industrial landscape, and how do we celebrate that through the treescape? And there's lots we can talk about that. I think the whole part of this that we're particularly interested in is the fact that it's a landscape scale project with a focus on that rural urban fringe and that continuum between the rural and urban. Particularly around the fact that it's all about public benefits too. So we have a forest plan. Each community forest has a forest plan that's embedded within policy within the NPPF national level. And our strapline is more from trees, which is very much around the ethos of this particular programme. So we want to get more from trees, particularly from the Mersey Forest. We've got the Natural Health Service using the power of nature to reduce health inequalities, as well as keeping us all well. So we want to learn very much from the fantastic collaboration we've got within Connected Treescapes, and we want to be able to share that knowledge that we have with other partners too. Particularly interested in the role in climate regulation, and Mersey Forest is one of the 13 community forests that is delivering the Trees for Climate programme, which is funded under the Nature for Climate Fund. So in terms of the gaps, we want to identify best opportunities for future tree planting, and that's very much an area for discussion. We've got a target of over nearly 7,000 hectares to deliver through the Trees for Climate programme, so a lot of tree planting happening at the moment over the next 5 years. But in doing so to provide the greatest benefit to people, as well as meeting those climate targets.
That's very good. Thanks, Claire. Lots to talk about there. I think we'll come back to this in a minute, but let's hear first from Branching Out and Mike Wilson. Mike.
Thank you very much indeed. It's great to be here, everyone. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm Professor of Drama and Director of the Storytelling Academy at Loughborough University. And I'm the PI on Branching Out, which I think largely means I'm convening a very diverse team of colleagues, which is a very transdisciplinary team. I should also apologise that my blinds in my study are no match, it seems, for the strong winter sunshine that's shining directly through the window. So that's why half of my face is lit up and the other half is probably in darkness. There's been so many sort of really fascinating ideas flying around for the past hour and a half. It seems a long time ago now since we saw the videos, but hopefully you can cast your minds back to the video and remember a little bit about Branching Out as a project. I don't intend to go into great detail about the mechanics of the project. I really want to focus on our approach to stakeholders and partners for the next couple of minutes. But to summarize really very quickly, Branching Out is trying to bring together the social and cultural values of urban treescapes alongside the biophysical values and data into a new values framework. And we're looking at the social and cultural values through storytelling, through three separate initiatives around the stories of the past, which is underway at the moment, looking at the folklore and folk tales associated with trees and woodland landscapes. Then stories of the present, where we're going to be collecting people's current experiences of engaging with trees. And then stories of the future, which is really around imagining, looking forward to the kinds of treescapes we want to have in the future. This will work with the biophysical data that we're using a range of methods, including remote sensing, aerial imagery, mapping, and citizen science approaches. In terms of stakeholders, in a way, it's difficult to talk about stakeholders as discrete groups of non-academic partners without a wider consideration of the range of organisations, communities and individuals who will be involved in Branching Out. There were, of course, key partners who were part of early discussions as the project was developed and contributed letters of support at application stage. And these include the three councils that represent the three cities where we'll be working. So there would be the City of York Council that are represented here today, Cardiff Council, Milton Keynes Council, and also Natural Resources Wales. The local authorities in particular will support a group of volunteer tree surveyors in each city. They'll establish an urban tree observatory that will be made up of 6 1-hectare plots, which will then be comprehensively surveyed for trees and will feed into the remote sensed image analysis of the urban forest. But the composition of what I like to think of as our stakeholder collective is also a moving feast. And new stakeholders already emerging and joining the project, including Radar, who are also represented here today. And in terms of Radar, it's really encouraging for us, given that arts and humanities are a core plank in what we're doing on this project, that arts organisations are coming forward and approaching us to participate. But most importantly, I think, and this is the real key point I want to make, is that what we're adopting here is a model of co-research and co-production of knowledge. And that's what underpins the project. And stakeholders, therefore, are simultaneously participants and beneficiaries of the research, but also there is no hierarchy of stakeholders here. There is no one organisation or individual who is less important than another. So instead, what we might do is identify 5 groups of stakeholders, stroke partners, stroke collaborators, stroke participants, stroke beneficiaries, however you want to define them, who are part of this collective. First of all, there's of course the research team itself. And as I said, that's a transdisciplinary team across the arts and humanities, the social sciences, environmental sciences, of course, and also urban design. Secondly, there are the policymakers and those organisations responsible for delivering policy. Third are the interest groups and organisations, community organisations. Fourthly, there are the citizens, the individuals who are going to be engaging in the project. And here particularly, we're interested not only in those people who already engage with trees and treescapes, but actually those who don't engage currently. And we want to help understand why people are perhaps do not engage with trees as much as they might. And lastly, and this is particularly important for us, another key partner we think is actually the natural environment itself, the trees themselves. And we heard before from the work that Membra is proposing, this idea that one of the things we're trying to do is to give the trees some agency, so that we're hoping that some of the biophysical data enable us to then be able to tell the story of the trees. I mean, we heard before how, for instance, tree rings create a kind of narrative record of the tree. And we can do the same, we hope, with the other biophysical data that we're producing. So some of the partners have already been identified and others will emerge as the project itself evolves. Locally based partners, we hope, will act as community gatekeepers to allow us to then engage with other organisations and individuals in our 3 focal cities. So what we have is a sense of a growing network of collaborators. What we're also going to do, and this was mentioned in the video, we'll establish citizen panels and end user panels in each city. So the citizen panels will have around 30 participants in each city, recruited from both interest groups and also pseudo-randomly sampled with representation across gender, age and ethnicity. We're also going to be working with an established research evaluation insight company who will assist in reaching stakeholder representatives across all of the cities, but also we'll work with our locally based partners, as I say, who have experience in reaching and engaging with a diverse range of citizens on various topics. So, for example, in Milton Keynes, this includes citizens interested in climate and environmental issues through involvement in local citizens groups, including Citizens MK and Transition Town Milton Keynes, York-based charity Friends of St Nicholas Fields, who've worked in the local community transforming a landfill site into a nature reserve. And in Cardiff, we're working with the Open University Widening Partnerships team in Wales, who work closely with the local communities, within local communities, opening up learning opportunities to people, including bespoke outreach in Welsh. The end user panels in each city are made up of key local decision makers and consultants, interest groups such as tree wardens, Trees for Cities and the Woodland Trust, local authority representatives such as strategic planners, tree officers and ecologists, friends of type user groups and other civil society organisations such as local development or campaigning groups, to ensure a high level of stakeholder engagement and encourage incorporation of research findings into decision making at different points and scales. So these 2 types of panels will be convened in each of the focal city throughout the life of the project and contribute to the development and application of the values framework to support development of local community-led thinking, informed decision-making, and shared solutions for urban tree management, as well as common ownership of the research itself amongst those it directly affects, with maximum potential for impact and societal change. The 2 types of panels will both then feed into a larger national assembly that we've planned for the end of the project, that will also include key stakeholders and umbrella groups from other cities in order to enable cross-learning and further impact and legacy. So just to sum up, the model that we've adapted here, very importantly for us, I think, is that of co-production, and that is supported through a growing organic network of organisations, communities and individuals. And I just wanted to finish by saying we have hopefully got our website up and running, in the sense that if it's not open now, very shortly there will at least be a landing page, but we have the domain name of www.valueoftrees.com. So I hope at some point you might pay us a visit on the website as well. And I shall finish there for now.
Thanks, Mike. I'm sure we'll be paying you a visit. That sounds really good. Dave, would you like to pick up and talk a bit about your perspective on all of that?
Yes, thank you and good afternoon. For me, I'll explain what the context in a moment. For me, there's a theme of managing expectation out in the public. I'm Dave Mee. I'm operations manager at the City of York Council, which doesn't tell you what I do, but my old job title was head of parks and open spaces. So I act as the landlord for all of the council's green spaces and a lot of the highway network, highway verges, roundabouts. So a lot of hands-on and experience of 25 years of York's green spaces. I'm also the gateway for quite often York community to access greater community management and care of our spaces. So we have a substantial network of friends and user groups and interest groups. Friends of St Nicholas Field was just mentioned, so I've been involved with them 20 odd years, and I'm sort of ultimately like the landlord for the site. In York 2 years ago, we had a new administration that came in. It's a combination of Liberal Democrat and Greens, and they declared a climate emergency. They committed to a 50,000 tree planting program over the life of the administration. They're instructed to join the White Rose Forest, which is a continuation from the Mersey Forest we've just heard about, all the way across the Pennines. We are a Queen's Canopy champion. So there's a lot of political and public enthusiasm for tree planting. Now, the issue we have in York is we're a very tight, small city. We have very little post-industrial landscape to develop. We've been planting trees probably for 20, 30 years in the small pockets of land we have available. But then there's this headline, we want to plant more trees, where can we plant them? I manage the council's tree officer. We have a tree maintenance team. And the issues that our tree officer can't resolve can often end up in my email inbox. So we have people that want to see tree planting in highway verges and don't understand that since the trees they've seen in the street have gone, the contractors have been in and cabled the street. I'm talking to you through a cable network in the verge at the front of my house. We have the other side of things where we've allowed house building too close to trees. And where the shading, trees have grown since the shelter belts were put in. We have issues where people just do not like trees in their street. Trees drop branches, they drop leaves, they drop debris, they drop blossom. One gentleman contacted me from a street called Chestnut Avenue to complain about his trees. The name gives you a clue as to where you're going to be living, but so for me, a project like this that can help, I suppose, educate the wider public and give us tools to deal and promote tree planting and help people understand why we can't sometimes tree plant. So that's my interest.
Okay, thanks very much. Finally, for this project, I think we're going to hear from Laura, who's going to tell us a bit about the radar program at Loughborough University. Is that right, Laura?
That's right, yes. Hello, hi. I also got a blind issue, so sorry, it's very blinding light behind me. Okay, so radar, just to give you a bit of kind of context, is a commissioning and research program based at Loughborough University, and we create opportunities for artists to work in collaboration with academic researchers. So sometimes we work with academics on projects that they've organised, as is the case here, and sometimes we sort of set up projects which we invite academics to collaborate on. And we often work with communities. We're very interested in co-production and the kind of methods that Mike's been talking about. So kind of ways that we could think about research in ways that involve communities as active participants in that process. And the kind of work that we might commission might result in an installation, a performance, perhaps a film or a publication. It's very important to us that our projects find outputs in the public realm. So we tend to work with galleries and other kind of arts organisation partners in order to present our work so that it can find an audience. So just a bit about how we work with artists. And others have spoken about the importance of artists being sort of embedded in the process of a research project from early on, which is important to us too. So they'll be involved in that kind of data collection process and engaging with these different stakeholder groups that Mike's spoken about. So they'll be kind of working parallel and in collaboration with the researchers. Artists that we work with are often researchers in their own right. They might kind of do kind of practice-based work, perhaps teaching alongside in universities and so on. So they have a kind of strong research skills existing, and they're going to be developing a work. They're not there to record the process. They're very much embedded in it, and they'll be thinking deeply about the research questions themselves, although their outputs will be filtered through their own ideas and methods as an artist, and the different ways of knowing and thinking that others have mentioned. So, I mean, we are early in the stages of this process, so we haven't appointed an artist yet. Our plan is to engage an arts partner, an art organisation who might show the work that artist is going to produce, and work with them to go through the process of selecting an artist. And we've got some ideas in mind. And this project, I mean, the question of why we wanted to collaborate on this project. So we are in the process of delivering a kind of wider program called Ecological Thinking, which is all about what creative methods bring to the study of ecology and the environment. A lot of that's kind of about thinking about method, getting away from some of the kind of traditional ways in which the non-human has been seen as sort of and studied as separate from human life and activity, perhaps seen as kind of less important than human life and activity. We want to move away from that kind of nature-culture divide, and also to produce work which sort of challenges sometimes ideas around scientific objectivity, relate very much to what Dee Hedden was saying about uncertainty and kind of embracing those kind of ambiguities that art can really sit with so well. And very importantly, we want to produce work which raises awareness of the climate emergency amongst audiences in ways that people can relate to, which can be kind of perhaps felt in a more visceral way than reading about that subject. So for branching out, we're really interested in questions of value. And Mike's talked about the way that the project is about finding ways to kind of record these kind of social, cultural, and biophysical values and kind of think across them. When we first spoke to Mike about the project, he talked about how he felt an artist might contribute to that sort of challenge of thinking across those different kinds of data. And that seemed like a great idea for us, because questions of value have for a long time been very important to the arts. The arts allow us to think about value in different ways, other than sort of, the financialized ways often thought about in society. And so we think an artist is going to be able to bring a lot to kind of thinking across that data, thinking about value in ways which might be challenging and surprising, as well as kind of perhaps drawing some unexpected connections. So our hope here is that this is an opportunity for an artist to engage deeply with a community, to make work which brings in their voices, and perhaps also works with, as Mike was saying, the trees themselves and as agents, and to think about these questions of value in a really immediate and engaging form.
Excellent, exciting stuff. All right. we now have a chance to, everyone has a chance to ask questions. I was going to start the process just by picking up some of Mike's comments. It's interesting that, Mike, you've said more than anyone else, I think, about the process and the mechanisms through which you're involving your stakeholders, your various panels and things. I'm interested in both your and Piran's thoughts on the scope for this being an evolving kind of project. Perhaps Piran, you might pick up on this. I mean, how far would you see your project recruiting new stakeholders as the research unfolds?
That is absolutely, I think, embedded into what we're trying to do here. I mean, and I think certainly in my research experience, and this may be a particularly something that the arts and humanities specifically brings to these kinds of transdisciplinary projects, is that research, it's always evolved. We design and plan our research if only to then have to change it and go back to square one once we're up and running. And I think whenever you're working with communities, then that brings in an additional level of uncertainty. And I know this is something we found, I mean, Kate will also be able to speak eloquently about this, about experiences on the Connected Communities programme some years ago, where you're constantly watching your research project evolve and change, and that's part of the excitement of it. So yes, in some ways, we're trying to imagine what our stakeholder engagement will look like. And what I'm presenting to you is our current thoughts and our plans. And I may well be coming back to you at the end of this project for the final conference saying, remember that stuff we said we were going to do? Well, that didn't quite happen that way, but it all is.
We've got one work package that acts as a kind of umbrella work package for the whole project, and will particularly be concerned and focused on how we're engaging with the stakeholders in our different case study sites. So we've got our key partners that provided letters of support and initial buy-in for the project. And through them and the Tree Council, what we're doing at the moment is mapping out the various potential partners and stakeholders in each of our case study sites. And then we're planning a series of engagement opportunities. So the focus of those will be to truly try and understand the priorities, the needs and attitudes in these different case study sites, the priorities in relation to things like nature connectedness, mental health and well-being, and the heritage and cultural values. And those engagement activities will likely bring in potential prospective partners and new stakeholders into our work. So as well as being sort of starting off as kind of the subjects of our research, as they come into the research, they'll become engaged and they'll start to be partners in the research as well. And I think you can probably think a bit like the Treescapes logo in a way, in that we're starting at the bottom, and if we're successful, our stakeholders are going to really kind of mushroom and branch out and so on, and we'll end up with a really diverse group of stakeholders, which I think will probably be different in each of our case study sites. But that again represents the differences that we're really interested in, and identifying those differences and what roles different partners and stakeholders play in different case study sites is really important if we're then going to not just work in the case studies, but think about how we can transfer our knowledge and understanding to new initiatives.
Yeah. Excellent. Any questions from the floor? People seem quite shy to put
no,
their
there
hands
is a
up,
few
but...
questions. There's no hands up, but there are some questions.
Right.
There's actually a really interesting discussion going on in the chat about the role of non-human subjects in terms of decision making and their agency. And so there's a question from Jan White from Early Childhood Indoors about whether we can think about trees themselves as participants and beneficiaries in co-production processes. I know that's sort of something that Mike touched on, but I think it's something that's probably relevant to both of Branching Out and Connected Treescapes.
Simple answer is yes. That's absolutely what one of the things we're trying to do is to give trees agency and recognise their agency in this process.
Pira, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so that isn't a specific focus of our project. I am involved with other projects where we are particularly looking at kind of the human and the non-human and that kind of perspective. But in this project, our social science aspect is more on the kind of the portfolio analysis side of things. So that isn't actually a focus of our project as we envisage it at the moment.
Okay, then there's a couple of questions for Claire Olver. So I know you have answered this in the Q&A, but for those who haven't seen that, I think it'll be worth saying that on the floor. So Kate Powell from Voices of the Future finds it fascinating that you're working in post-industrial landscapes and wonders how much that joins up with the ex-coal mining communities in those regions. And then along with that, Claire Rishbeth has asked, what of your projects has got the strongest or the most creative involvement of young people? So 2 questions in one there.
So I could give you an example, not just with the ex-coal mining communities, but where we are in Cheshire, that the name Witch, as in Northwich and Nantwich, shows the heritage of the salt extraction, and then from salt came the chemical industry. So around Northwich, large areas of land were developed for the chemical industry based on originally on salt. That then left large tracts of land where the deposits from the chemical industries were left, which were unsuitable for development. And these have then been turned into community woodlands, particularly just to the north of the town of Northwich. Within those woodlands and from those woodlands are views of not just the coal mining, because that's further north in St Helens, but of the chemical industry. And when the designs were created for and the consultation was undertaken with the local community, it was really clear from listening to the community that they did not want to block the view. In fact, they wanted to keep the open views of the industrial landscape so that they didn't turn their back on the heritage of their parents and their grandparents. And so I think trees are fantastic for screening and for developing the infrastructure to hold more businesses, but actually it's really important to know where trees are not to be used, and that where we don't use trees can speak as loudly as where we do use trees. So that's really, it's just another example of how we work through communities to identify how we can build on that industrial heritage that we're really lucky to have in this area. And there was one other question, I think, about working with children.
Yep.
Repeat that, Julie, please.
Yeah, so which of your projects do you think has had the strongest or most creative involvement of young people? So that could be teenagers to young adults.
Well, we've done lots through our Trees for Learning programme, and that has very much child-led, and particularly around the forest school work as well. So I have a think about any particular projects, but in general, when we work with young people and around tree planting, we did a site over in Liverpool where the children took real control over the sculptures that were created as part of that community woodland. It was a really sensitive site because it's where a young lad, Rhys Jones, had been murdered. And it was on 2 pieces of derelict land near Croxteth in Liverpool. And we wanted to work with the local community, and there's been some really fantastic evidence around previously the social housing around the derelict 2 fields was unoccupied, and then working with the local children to use their creativity to produce sculptures that went into the woodlands was a really good way of engaging with the youngsters after what was a very difficult time. And as a result, the woodlands are now thriving, and people talk about it being their local gym. So they're going for walks and around, and the number of people within the social housing has increased as well.
Thanks, Claire. I think we're coming to the end of the session, unless there are any other questions. I can't see any others in the question answer.
No, there's no more.
Section.
There's no hands up.
All right, so thank you everyone for that panel. That was a really great discussion. I think, Julie, you're going to now pick up.
So we're coming towards the end of the conference today, but we would like to invite Ian Bateman to give a presentation. So Ian is Professor of Environmental Economics at the University of Exeter's Business School. Hi, Ian. And he's going to present on the Net Zero Plus project that he's leading. Net Zero Plus is part of UKRI's greenhouse gas removal demonstrators programme. And you might be wondering why we've asked Ian to speak today. Well, we think that the Net Zero Plus project has some synergies and links to the Future of Treescapes programme, and what we're really keen to do as part of Treescapes is to link up to projects across UKRI that are complementary or aligned to the Treescapes programme. So that's why we've asked Ian to talk to us today, and we're really excited to hear about the Net Zero Plus project. So I'll hand over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just check that you can hear me and also see my slides?
We can. Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Ah, that's great. That's really good. Okay, well, I am really pleased. In fact, I feel honoured to be asked to talk to you today because you've got such a fantastic group in the audience. So the Net Zero Plus project, as you can see from the title, it's an attempt to bring scientific and socioeconomic information into treescapes decision-making. A large team, very happy to provide further information, overviews, that sort of stuff. Just contact that email address that you can see there, netzeroplus@exeter.ac.uk. Okay, let's see if I can just get rid of that. No, I can't. All right, so hopefully you can see most of the screen anyway. The objective, first of all, to provide a free open access decision support system for improving land use decisions. Three elements of that, which I hope link well to the really fabulous talks that we've seen today. Bringing together information on the multiple drivers and consequences of land use change. I'll go through both of those in more detail. Providing a highly interactive platform for decision makers to explore this information. So designed actually, although there'll be a basic system, each user will require a customized version of that to fit with their particular needs. Nevertheless, the basic system will actually tell most people what they want for whatever decisions they're taking. As I say, all free, all open access, and the intention is hopefully that this will never be taken down, because the third issue is that the system is modular, which means that you can extend it. And so some of the talks that we've seen today, I think, will provide great extensions for this. We don't pretend in any way that we're going to be looking at all issues within this, and I'm sure you'll be quite convinced of that by the time I've finished talking about it, but also that you can update, so you can extend and update, so hopefully this won't ever go out of date. And we're applying this system to the challenge of planting new woodlands needed for the UK's net zero commitment. So moving on to that, what we have is a world of two interconnected systems. We have the environment, but it's also very important, of course, to recognise that we have an economy, and these two things interact together. They're both quite complicated, and they both link to each other in multiple ways. And that realization allows us to think about the challenges that require such interconnected thinking, such as trying to tackle both climate change and biodiversity loss at the same time. The sort of simple solution that has been put forward is you just plant trees. What I think all of us would recognise is that it's a bit more complex than that, and that's what this system tries to help with. So, for example, at the core of it, it recognises that land use does not just occur randomly, and it's very rare that we can actually dictate what land use will actually occur, because, as has been pointed out by some of the speakers, land is owned. And therefore, we need to recognise that its use is a mix. Wish I could get rid of this thing. I hope you can't see it, but half of my screen is obscured. I'll just see if I can get rid of some of this. No, I can't. Sorry. Anyway, this land use is mainly driven by market values. So the incomes that people get from producing food, producing timber, that sort of stuff. But we're also, of course, interested in all the non-market values that arise from this. So things like impacts on recreation and health, greenhouse gases, water, environment, biodiversity. And it's only when we consider all of these benefits and costs together that we can actually see the value of woodland to society. Looking at one thing on its own, unfortunately, probably won't convince those decision makers to make large-scale change. So, let's hope this works. Okay. At the centre of this, then, we have an understanding of how land use is formed. And it is driven by these three factors. The physical environment puts a lot of constraints on what you can do. Market forces affect things enormously, and policy can change things. So it can, for example, subsidise some uses, it can create regulations, that sort of stuff. We're very lucky in this country that we have fantastic data sources to understand this with and produce understandings which actually work really well. So, for example, estimates of response to change, predictions, which turn out to be really good predictors of what actually happens in the future. And because of this, because we have this understanding, we can see what the consequences of change would be, what the consequence, for example, of a change in subsidies might be, or rather, of course, what the consequences of climate change will be upon this system as well. Climate's going to change quite, well, terrifically fast, certainly if you look at it on a geological scale, but even within the lifetime of humans, it's actually changing incredibly quickly. And that it means that we're not going to be looking at a stable baseline. Things are going to be changing all the time as we move into the future, and we see land use changing as a response, not just to policy, but in terms of the environment changing. This land use understanding allows us to then feed into a lot of other understandings of the consequences of that land use change. For example, how's it going to change the water environment? How's it going to change ecological systems? And also, how's it going to affect economics and well-being? So both market values, which we can assess fairly easily, but also non-market values, some of which we have really quite advanced ways of being able to assess and even value. We can extend that understanding of how things are going to change, not just to things like systems like agriculture, but also trees, of course, themselves. Trees are not going to grow in the future the way they're growing now. For some species, that's going to mean actually quite a reduction in their growth rates. For others, it's going to increase. And you can, well, take it as you will, whether you see that those changes there as good or bad. Probably depends, you know, whether you are somebody recreating in woodlands or if you're a forestry owner. We can also use the available science to actually work out what the consequences of these changes will be for systems like greenhouse gas emissions. And you can see there's an awful lot of change that will happen. Obviously everybody talks about storing carbon in trees, but you've got to think what happens to those trees when they're cut down, what happens to soils, what happens to machinery associated with this, how's this going to affect livestock, how is that going to affect imported carbon and emissions, and to what extent might diet have an effect on that. And bringing this all together allows us to see that different land uses have radically different consequences for our emissions futures. One of the other things that we have increasingly good scientific models of is the biodiversity consequences of land use change, and we can extend these models across a whole variety of taxonomic groups, and we can see that actually the future is not looking good for various species. Just to finish off, we can bring all this together into this decision support system, which integrates all this different information and allows us to answer important questions like where should we plant Britain's new forests. And I want to give you an example from some work we did with the government a couple of years ago, where we pointed out that there's two answers to that. And one is what happens if you do the usual approach of just leaving it to the market by throwing money onto the table and seeing whoever picks it up. Well, if you do that, whoever picks it up will be determined by subsidies, yes, but also the foregone agricultural values that landowners will actually see as a cost. Timber's, to be honest, not very valuable these days. It'll ignore most of the non-market benefits associated with that. If you do this, then these are the places that you will expect to take up that net zero forestry challenge. Places that are remote, often places that are not particularly good for a storage of carbon, not particularly targeted towards, say, engagement with the public. These are remote areas. And when you tot up the value associated with that, it's not even worth doing it. We'd be better off not planting these forests than just following the usual approach to this. If instead we actually take information into account, I'm talking here about the information that I've shown to you so far, but of course that could be supplemented by the other information that is going to be gathered within the Treescapes programme. If we do that, we're counting all of these different benefits here. Many of them actually we can robustly value them. Some of them we can't, at least not in my opinion, but there's other things we can do about those. We don't ignore them. We say, for example, well, we're not going to tolerate any further loss in, say, biodiversity. If we do that, do we plant in the same place? Absolutely not. We plant in very different places. We plant in places which are much better for carbon storage, much better for people's access to those forests. And the benefits that come from that. And actually, also this approach generates biodiversity gains. When we value this, we find that actually, as you'd expect, if we get this right, forestry can generate enormous value for society across Britain. I hope that gives you some idea of what we can do here. Here's a schematic trying to show all the different things that we're trying to bring into this analysis, and hopefully it will provide some sort of basis to maybe integrate some of the Treescapes information as well. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you. I greatly appreciated it.
Great, thanks. That was really, really interesting and can already see some of the synergies between your project and the Treescapes programme. Before I open it up to the floor for questions, and please do put any questions you've got fit into the Q&A or raise your hand. I'd like to ask a question myself, if I may.
Yes, please.
I just wondered whether whether you are able to include in your decision support tool social and cultural values beyond recreation. I know it's really difficult. It's very hard to put a quantity on those things. And I just wondered whether there is a way of perhaps combining the modelling with some form of participatory decision making, or you know, that's that form of incorporating that into it, because it feels a little bit like it's missed perhaps.
There's almost 3 points. First of all, I'm not an expert on the cultural side, and we've designed something that sort of reflects the bits that I do know about. However, we have designed it very specifically in a way that is modular and very, very open to bringing in further information. All I can say about what we've produced at the moment is that it's better than just leaving it to the market. I'm not at all saying this is the perfect answer. In fact, you know, I just say this is the start of a process. Can you bring in other information? Absolutely. It's designed to be highly spatial. So the spatial resolution on this system goes, well, some of the data is right down to a matter of meters. So, you know, if you've got information on cultural heritage, cultural values, which are associated with different places, absolutely, this is a system designed to bring this in. You did ask one other thing, though. You know, can you value that? Now, what I would point out is that perhaps unusually for an economist, I'm saying you can't value everything, but that doesn't mean that you leave it out of the decision making. So if I use the example of biodiversity there, I don't personally think that we can produce robust economic values for biodiversity at the moment. Maybe we never will be able to, but certainly my own research suggests we can't at the moment. As you can see, we can still bring it in to the analysis, for example, by really quite simple rules saying, for example, in that case, here's a whole range of species which have already been pushed to the edge of viability. We cannot allow that to go any further. Therefore, if this project threatens that, it cannot go ahead in that area. It can only go ahead in areas where that doesn't help. So I hope that this is highly compatible with other ways of bringing real-world information into decision making.
Yeah, great. So sort of you're recognizing that it's not just about economic value.
No, it's
and
not.
We've got to make sure we incorporate the other values as well. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, there's a big difference between market prices, economic values, and not all values can be expressed in pound signed forms, and we're very open to that.
Perfect, thank you. I'll open it up to others now. I see Stephen, you've got your hand raised, so if you could.
Thanks, Julie.
You can.
Great talk, Ian. Yeah,
thank you.
Really interesting, thank you, and nice to see everything sort of drawn together in a really integrated way. I just had a question. You presented just, for example, the idea that we would see a dramatic change in the way that tree species will, I guess, the productivity that they will have over a given period of time. Fixed view of what a tree species is. That's a static view of what a tree species might be, that we take a measure of what it does in this current environment, we project that into the future and say it will do worse or better. But these are obviously systems that will respond, and they may change, or we may even, we might breed a spruce variety that's better for the future climate, or a new wave of genetic diversity might be recruited into a population that means that it will do better in the future. So I just wondered whether or not you have a capacity or plans to build capacity to get that sort of responsiveness into the system.
Absolutely. So you can, we already have, I can't remember the number exactly, but let me say about 50 species, 50, 60 species already in the analysis. The way this is done, actually, you could, if you say, well, we believe that in X years we will have a species that conforms to these characteristics, you can put it in. So if you can actually define what you mean by a species of the future, you can put that in. The models actually already pick up genetic improvement, let's call it change, over the last sort of century, and you can see that it's difficult to very clearly separate the effect of genetics from management, because often the two have been changed at the same time. But nevertheless, you know, to the extent that you can defend a difference between those two, you can bring it in. What I would say is that the models within this are based on the Hadley Centre climate change projections, the full range of them, you know, right the way from satisfy the net zero commitments, and in fact we even go further than that, and we actually see climates actually beginning to climate change reversing, all the way to everything goes to hell, and it has a huge impact on land use. Yeah.
Thanks. We're almost out of time, Ian, but I'd like just to offer up one last question from the Q&A from Chris Fremantle, who's asking whether it will include whether natural regeneration is better than planting. It's a big question.
It will include a comparison of natural regeneration versus planting. I know from prior experience it's a very, very good idea to not say better with regards to anything to do with natural regeneration or rewilding or anything like that, because it's such a contentious issue. So we are using data which will allow us to compare planted solutions with regenerative and what you might call rewilding solutions, and that, you know, the two produce different results. One thing that I would like to stress: this is not the decision. This is a decision support system. You know, this goes into a decision process, which might be participatory, it might be expert-led, it might be DEFRA, you know, deciding what they want to do into the future. But this is not the decision. It is bringing information into that decision. I hope, and I suppose I believe, that adding information is usually a good thing. And the more that you consider a conceptualization of the world, which is closer to the real world, the more likely that you'll make better decisions. And you move away from what we've done in the past, which tends to be a sort of single focus. You know, we want a land use policy for food, and everything else just disappears. Well, in the real world, it doesn't. It's all integrated and it all links.
Great. Yeah, I guess this goes back to Chris's earlier point about it all being very holistic. So yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Ian. That was a really interesting presentation, and I think everyone really enjoyed that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. So we're almost at the end of our launch event. It's been really fascinating to hear from our stakeholders from the projects, and from to hear their expectations for the projects that they're involved in, and to hear how the projects are addressing real world issues. This event really has been about starting those conversations between the projects, between the programme and between stakeholders. It's very much something that needs to continue, that dialogue we need to build on. And so we need to, we'd really like to encourage you to keep in touch with the programme. And there's a number of ways you can do that. So you're probably aware of the programme website, so you can find out about future events and activities on there. A number of the projects also have their own websites, so you can find out about what they're doing on their own website, so check those out. We've also just launched a Treescapes mailing list that you can sign up to via the website, and we'll send you information about any future events or news pertaining to the Treescapes programme. So do sign up to that to keep in touch. And as Clive mentioned earlier, the second call is currently open. So if you're interested in applying to that, you can find details about that on the website. And we've also got a collaborator finder if you want to identify potential partners for a call to project. Social media as well. So follow us on Twitter, follow other projects on Twitter. And you can find out information from us there. Yeah, Clive, did you want to?
Yeah, I think you've touched all the bases actually, Julie. I mean, I just can only echo what you've said, that this is an amazing range of collaborations going on. And also I think the important point that we're at an early stage, and that these partnerships are going to develop, perhaps new stakeholders coming on board projects. So it is a developing process, which I think is really exciting. And it augurs really well for the ultimate impact of the research, of course. That's that, which is what we're all striving to achieve here. So great stuff, really good.
And thank you to all of the projects for preparing your videos and your presentations, and for you and the stakeholders for engaging so animatedly and enthusiastically today. It's been a really great event, I think. So I think we'll say goodbye and thank you all, and hope to see you at our next event, which we're planning in May next year. And we are very much planning that to be a face-to-face event. So more details will be coming out on that later on. Thanks very much then.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.